Afternoon. Thank you so much for your patience as the county board came out of closed session. If you'll give me just a minute as our colleagues join us, I'm going to call for a vote to certify our just concluded closed session. All right, let me go ahead and make the motion. If necessary, we'll keep that open for a vote as Ms. Garvey is able to join us. Okay. I move that the members of the county board certify that at the just concluded closed session, first, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Chapter 37, Title 2.2 of the Code of Virginia, and further, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Second. Thank you very much. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Crystal?
Yes.
Mr. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Carantonis?
Yes.
Mr. DeFerranti?
Yes.
Excellent. We'll have Ms. Garvey certify when she joins us. All right. Thank you again for your patience. We're delighted to be back. Yes. Thank you. We are delighted to be back at our budget table today with representatives of Human Resources for the county to discuss compensation, leadership of the Department of Parks and Recreation, and the leadership of the Arlington Public Library. We are slated to go till 6 p.m. today across those three topics with opportunities for discussion. I do believe that we have some commissioners with us as well. So following our presentation and compensation, we will hear from Chair Helen Connolly of the Human Rights Commission. Depending on timing, Nancy Anderson, the chair of member of our Civil Service Commission. And then once we hear from Parks and Recreation, their presentation will be followed by presentations from our Parks and Rec Commission, our Forestry and Natural Resources Commission, and our Sports Commission. Given the number of presentations and resident groups represented today, I will ask for partnership from everyone presenting. If you can keep your comments as focused as possible to allow some time for dialogue, we'd appreciate that very much. And I will take my own advice and say nothing further and instead turn it over to the manager to introduce Ms. Foster for our first presentation. Welcome, Ms. Foster.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon as we talk about the manager's proposed budget focused on compensation. And I want to thank my staff. Many are sitting behind me. Jason Drake heads up the training and organizational development team, along with employee relations. Lawan, I believe, is directly behind me, has the HRIS system, safety risk management, and she is responsible for putting the budget presentation together. Tamara Galliani has class and comp and recruitment, and Kristen Young handles all the employee benefits. So they'll be helping me a little bit today. So we'll get started. Tiffany, next slide. Tiffany's presenting from home. We're moving slides along for us. So the mission statement: to provide leadership and expertise to attract, develop, and retain a high-performing and diverse workforce. Our total compensation philosophy, which we developed with the board in 2018, a snippet of it is on the slide. If we need to refer to more, we can bring that slide up as well. But the county recognizes our employees are the foundation of our success. We strive to offer a meaningful, well-rounded total compensation package that provides employees with fair, competitive pay, benefit, and retirement options. The proposed budget items in the manager's budget: an employee bonus, a $1,600 one-time gross bonus for employees. Salary range movement, so we'd actually be moving the salary range top and bottom by 3%. Tuition reimbursement increased from $2,200 a year to $2,500 a year, but that's no budget change. Those are dollars that are in that tuition reimbursement budget that we haven't used. Pay compression study, we might talk a little bit about compression, but when we bring new hires in that are either really close to or over our existing employees, we create some pay issues. So there's some dollars focused on relieving the pay compression issues we have. And then the annual merit increases of 4.25% for general employees, 6.5% for public safety employees, and the employees who are in pay for performance have a 4.5% budget, but a 0 to 6% opportunity for pay increases. Next slide. So in the region, we are showing you what we know of going on in the region. So for Arlington, no cost of living increase, often called a market rate adjustment, but the merit increases that we just mentioned on the previous slide. Alexandria has a COLA this year. They haven't had one in a few years, different by organization, so different for fire, police, and general employees. And they have step increases of 2.3% to 5%. So the lower entry-level jobs will probably have the 5% steps. The more tenured you are in the organization, you'll get towards the 2.3% steps. Fairfax has a COLA. They have a formula they use every year, so they often have a COLA. That formula is providing them with slightly over a 4% increase for COLA. And their merit increases vary between public safety, which is a flat 5%, and general employees who get 1.25 to 3%. Prince William has an increase for general employees and an increase, general employees of COLA for 1% and a merit step increase of 3% for general and 3% for public safety. Now, Prince William and Fairfax have done something in the not too recent past. So earlier this year, they did some other increases that wouldn't be reflected on this slide. Compensation concerns. I'm sure you've all heard that it's a rather tight labor market. And so there are certainly some compensation issues that we want to bring to your attention. Pay improvements are often not long-lasting. So even though we have these job studies that we've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years, where we look at our competitiveness in the region, we quickly become outpaced by our comparison jurisdiction. So even though we're focused on pay, if we're not hyper-focused on pay, we fall behind a little bit quickly. As you can see from the previous slide, the surrounding jurisdictions often pay COLAs. We do not normally do that. And so on average, for the last 10 years, the range increases in those surrounding jurisdictions, and we talked about Arlington doing a 3% at the bottom and at the top. Over the last 10 years, those range increases have outpaced ours, 18% to 12%. So we're having a tough time staying competitive. Compression issues, which we also mentioned. New hires are requiring higher salaries. There's a shrinking labor pool out there. It's harder to get good employees and get them on board, so we're bringing them in at higher salaries. Our pay exception requests, so bringing people in at higher rates of pay, keeping current employees, promotions, anything that we would call a pay exception where they come through HR to have us look at their pay requests, have increased 100% over the last year. And we are often looking at pay compression and trying to help departments keep employees as they bring those new employees on board. So how does that impact the employees that are in that same work unit or that same work team? And now we're starting to offer hiring bonuses for some of the critical jobs. Fairfax was probably the first to do that, and I think we're right behind Fairfax in emergency mental health, police. And I talked to Fairfax today, and they have a couple more queued up that they'll be moving along shortly. So, next slide. To talk a little bit about that job family study where I said we're quickly falling behind, we took a couple of jobs that we've done in the last couple of years to show you what that looked like. So the first one is the trade series, which we did pretty early on, maybe about 4 years ago, before the job family study. Now the job family study looks at their ranges to make sure their ranges are competitive in the region. So we want them to be able to come in at a fair pay, and then we want them to have a full career and not max out too early. Before the job family study, you could see we were behind almost 9% in trades. We did our job family study. We flipped to the other side. We flipped to the good side. We were up about 1% in the region. But fast forward to what the other jurisdictions are doing, you can see in fiscal year 22, we're back down about 8% in trades, and the proposed increases will nudge that down just a smidgen in trades. Clinical, a wider variation. So we started behind about 12% in clinical, popped a little bit higher into the good column, and then you can see we've dropped back down, so we're about 1% behind on clinical as well. So it's something you have to really stay focused on. You can't take your eyes off that prize. And then the planner series, we were just slightly behind, and we're still in the positive, if you will, on the planner series. But you know, once the other jurisdictions start putting some increases in, we have to keep an eye on these and perhaps go back and look at some of them all over again. Recruitment. It's a challenge. It's a little bit more of the beating of the bushes than it used to be. So job openings outnumber the applicants nationally, and it's certainly true in this region, 2 to 1. In 2021, we had about 11% of our employees leave our organization. Nearly 40% of those were retirements, so we can see some of these coming. In the first 6 months, our job announcements, so where we're posting, where we're out looking for people, are up 61%. Now, during COVID, people were a little slower to post jobs, kind of waiting and seeing, so that's not that surprising, but they're higher than the normal. And our applications coming in are down 46%. So it's a struggle. You only need one really good one to fill those jobs, but everybody likes to have a choice, and the choices are getting fewer, and you got to stay on top of them before somebody else hires that same person. So they're taking longer to fill, and it's putting a strain on the organization in multiple areas. And we're saying fiscal year 2019 was probably our more normal, typical recruiting year. What are we doing about it? Well, we're trying to create pipelines. You may have heard we're working with the colleges in the area, really focused right now on Northern Virginia Community College. We have a lot of interest. We have a lot of traction there, expanding internships, expanding opportunities to get in front of students, expanding opportunities to get students in front of us. Looking at multimedia approaches to make sure our hiring managers have a quicker way to get people through the process, and trying to implement some best practices so they can move things a little bit quicker than they have been in the past. And then being a little bit more proactive and reaching out to candidates in some of these hard to fill jobs, working with the hiring managers, getting on LinkedIn, reaching out to individuals that we know are interested, going through our own personal Rolodexes, if you will. What have we done in screening candidates to move things through and get more people in front of hiring managers? I think we talked to you a year or so ago about blind screening, where we remove identifying information off of these applications before they go to hiring managers. It's a more equitable way to get people in front of hiring managers, and so we're doing that in about 11 departments right now. Compensation maintenance plan, we also call it the job family studies, is meant to ensure we have competitive salary ranges and that we can affordably give people salary increases if we find that they're off market. So anybody who goes through a job family study, if they are behind market, they would get a 5% increase. The ones that we have been working on most recently are at the bottom of that page. We're currently working on the admin and support team. That's a huge job family study. As soon as we wrap that up, it's about 600 employees. As soon as we wrap that up, we'll move into communications, libraries, and parks. I know they're all queued up in the back of the room, and they're probably ready to move on that as well. And then coming next year, we have the management accountability program. So that's the deputy directors, the division chiefs in the organization, human resources, accounting and financial jobs. Those are throughout the organization. They're not just in one department. And then legal. To talk about total compensation, get off of actual pay. This slide will show you what your benefit programs look like in comparison in the region. Everybody except Prince William has multiple vendors and multiple plans. Everybody except Prince William has a consumer-driven health plan. Consumer-driven health plans have been around for 10 or 15 years, but it encourages employees to be wise consumers, and it has a health spending account set up next to it so employees can tap into the health spending account to help pay down some of the expenses in the plan. It typically offers lower premiums to the employees, so if they're not using the healthcare system at all, they have a more affordable premium, and when they do use the health system, they have a health spending account to help offset what is a higher deductible normally in that plan. Across the region, the cost sharing between the county or the employer and the employee, it's an 80-20% cost sharing in Alexandria and Arlington. Fairfax has an 85-15, and Prince William has it vary by their different programs with Anthem. For family coverage, Arlington has a 75-25% cost sharing. Alexandria stays at 80-20, and Fairfax drops down to 75-25, with Prince William still having various arrangements based on the plan selected. Proposed premium increases, we are proposing 0% for our larger plan, Cigna, where most of our employees get their services. and a 5% increase to Kaiser. Kaiser is actually insured. Cigna is self-insured. Alexandria has substantially higher premium increases. And again, I talked to Fairfax today. Theirs will actually come in higher than the 5% shown there. And Prince William is having a 7% premium increase. I did ask Fairfax what they attribute it to. They have some really big high-cost claims that are driving up their premiums right now. And everybody takes a turn going through some of those periods where claims get a little bit high. Comparison for retiree medical. So when you leave our organization, and you retire, you can keep your medical program. So we switched providers this year and changed to a Medicare Advantage plan, a different type of plan for our employees on Medicare. So the employees are having a big savings on their premium, so they should be pretty happy, and they're going with a named provider in United Healthcare, and there's a comparable savings to the county, projection of about $3 million a year on retiree medical for the county. Our program has a phased subsidy, so based on when you retire, some of the current retirees, the county will subsidize their monthly premium up to $960. A lot of the current workforce would get that subsidy up to $600 a month. And then anybody who was hired after 7/1/2008, when we made this change, will get a $300 a month subsidy. But stacking that up against Alexandria, Fairfax, and Prince William, we are still pretty generous in the region in our subsidy for retiree medical. And Prince William, being part VRS, part their own program, they offer $165 from the county and an additional $45 per month from VRS if you stay for 30 years. The retirement program, we haven't made any changes to in a number of years, and I don't think the surrounding jurisdictions have done much either. But you can see based on a 25-year service employee, what the income replacement would be. So obviously somebody retiring from Arlington after 25 years of service, this is a general employee, would get just slightly over 42% of pay. Pretty comparable in the region, 45% in Alexandria, 50% in Fairfax. And Prince William has a couple of choices under their VRS plan. So it's 25% plus a defined contribution plan, I believe. Employee contributions into those programs are pretty comparable in the region. Those are pre-tax contributions, with Arlington having the lowest contribution for employees. Retirement ages, again, are also pretty comparable. We have an age in service, so when your age in service equals 80, you can retire. You can see the other jurisdictions are slightly higher. In the last couple of years, they have increased theirs from what we call the rule of 80, age in service equals 80, to age in service equals 90 or 85 in Fairfax. Final average salary, which is what we calculate that payment off of, that 42% is calculated off of a salary. Ours is off of your high 3. Alexandria is off of a high 5, Fairfax high 3, and Prince William high 5. So high 3 is the more generous road to go. Normally your last 3 years are your highest paid years, so you'd be getting a higher retirement benefit if you use a high 3. And our multipliers are pretty comparable. That 42.5% at 25 years is 1.7 times 25. Alexandria has a 1.8, part being Alexandria, part being VRS. Fairfax has a 2.0, and Prince William has a 1%. So pretty comparable on retirement for general employees. The next slide will show public safety employees. Again, I'll tell you pretty comparable in the region. The income replacement across the top row will show Fairfax Police with perhaps a generous replacement value. They're also contributing the most. They also do not participate in Social Security. So everybody but Fairfax Police will be part of a Social Security plan. Normal retirement ages are very comparable. Final average salary is very comparable. And their multipliers are shown across the bottom, also very comparable, going from 1.85 in Prince William with a supplement in VRS to the 2.8 at Fairfax Police. Live Where You Work grants, which we've had for a number of years. We revised the program last year. It increased those grants. So they are now income-based and household size-based grants, with the maximum grant being $25,000. Employees commit to stay for 5 years should they get a grant. 3 of the 9 grants that we issued in '22 went to first responders. Rental grants were also increased from $800 even to $2,000 for employees earning less than $72,000 and $1,000 for all other employees. That's a one-time grant if you move into the county and rent. Those go rather quickly. So 10 of the 22 grants that we issued in fiscal year 2022 went to first responders. And then we're showing in the other little box the number of employees that actually live in Arlington. So you can see police has the highest ratio, or 36% of the police force is living in Arlington. And some of our police officers are even living in Barcroft, where they get subsidy to live down in that complex. Organizational development, where we have a little bit of a focus on equity. Our courses are all available online. You know, pandemic made us move a lot of things online. Huge increase in participation associated with that. Many of them are 24/7. We have streamlined the training approval process. I think some employees experienced some hiccups along the way, and we tried to make that approval process a little bit easier to get more employees into the programs. Online allows us to probably get more employees into each session as well. We have developed new mandatory training for all new managers, so managers are equipped to come on board and understand all the nuances of managing in Arlington, so they get a little bit of everything. Some equity training, some employee relations training, just a whole program to help managers be successful. And our racial equity training series, which I think maybe the 4th module is being rolled out this month. And then from an engagement perspective with employees, our employee resource groups are still active and moving forward. So there were 21 virtual events with our employee resource groups in fiscal year 2022 with about 2,600 employees. And I know many of you join us for those employee celebrations. Next slide. And so what's coming down the pike? We have to complete that compensation maintenance plan. We showed you the 2 years we have to go to complete that round. We want to look at pay compression to make sure that employees coming on board are paid fairly, as are those that are working right around them or side by side with them. Collective bargaining will be heating up a little bit after we wrap up this budget cycle, so we're preparing for collective bargaining negotiations, make sure we have all our data ready. Our PRISM system, where payroll is run, where you enter your time, is going through an upgrade, and it probably will for the next 12 to 18 months. Our employee resource groups, we're going to continue to work with them to make sure they have the resources they need to keep our employees engaged, celebrate their diversity. And then we're going to continue with our race training and roll out more modules. I know there's a complete program that focuses on our racial equity training. Next slide. I think the next slide should say something like, any questions?
Okay, before we move on to board questions, I'd like to take the opportunity to hear from Chair Connolly with the Human Rights Commission. Helen, are you with us on the video conference?
I am. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for allocating some time on your schedule for me. Wanted to share a few inputs from the Human Rights Commission as you all are going through the process of thinking about the budget for next year. And at the outset, Katie, I just wanted to commend the work that the county and specifically that the board has done over the past few years in pushing forward the important work of DE&I efforts, including but not limiting to, of course, hiring a chief race and equity officer, commissioning the barrier analysis, the results of which came in last year in 2021, and then commissioning the outside vendor to formalize the process of implementing an affirmative action plan. All of that work is absolutely awesome from the Human Rights Commission's perspective. But what our focus is on for this particular year is that you all have the manpower and the resources necessary to implement the various recommendations that are coming out of those 3 steps. And I think as most of the folks on this call know, there are a series of recommendations listed in the barrier analysis, in the affirmative action plan, and I'm certain that the Chief Race and Equity Officer has a basket of recommendations as well. And, from where the HRC sits, we see that there are resource constraints at the Office of Human Rights, right? We can see that, that the demands that are flowing through that office has increased exponentially in COVID, given the increased investigation work that the Office of Human Rights is responsible for. We can see the additional accommodation processing work that has to flow through that office. And this is all happening at a time when just before COVID, that office lost headcount. I think you guys lost maybe two full-time employees. And so we see the critical work that the county needs to continue to do to build on what it's already done as being sort of necessarily implemented through the Office of Human Rights. So the specific ask from the human rights perspective is to add to your budget 2 additional FTEs to bring the Office of Human Rights up to a total of 7 employees, which in our experience as professionals in the space, we think is even pretty small given the size of the constituency that the Office of Human Rights is serving, but is at least in line with what other federal agencies are doing in terms of kind of sizing the office with a kind of like a similar scope of duties and responsibilities. The other thing I will bring to your attention in terms of budget requests are 2 administrative budget line items. The first is that for many years, the county has had an Arlington County ambassador or liaison who has participated in the Virginia Human Rights Association, which is an association that brings together all of the human rights commissions across the state. And this person has been serving as an ambassador at her own expense and has been paying those dues directly as an individual. And what we have learned through the liaison is that all of the other jurisdictions in the state have managed to pay for a membership for the particular commission in their applicable jurisdiction to participate in this important work, which is an opportunity for knowledge sharing and best practices around what our other jurisdictions are doing. So the ask is a $350 line item so that the commission level membership can be attained for purposes of the HRC writ large. The second administrative budget request is to just ensure now that, God willing, we're pulling out of COVID. I think the hope is that we will all have a Hunter Award program that is in person again this year, which of course takes place in December every year and honors those, individuals and those businesses in our community that are demonstrating a commitment to human rights. And in years past, prior to COVID, there's been a budget for catering and for, to honor those recipients with a reception. And so we just want to ensure that that budget item comes back in as we're pulling out of COVID. With that, I thank you very much for hearing the point of view of the Human Rights Commission and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Chair Connolly. I certainly commend you and the Commission on your steadfast advocacy on the AAP and barrier analysis, which was a number of years in coming. So the fact that we now have those in place and recommendations to follow up on is a real testament to your work. I also commend you with what I think might be the single most manageable budget ask I have seen in my 7 years of doing budgets at $350. So look forward to following up on that one as well.
Don't forget the FTEs.
That's look, those are not the most manageable, the 350. Thank you so much. Among your asks, I should say. I don't believe that Nancy Anderson was able to join us until later. And so we'll keep an eye out if she's able to hop on. Perhaps we can hear from the Civil Service Commission as represented by her later in the program. For now, I'm going to go ahead and jump in with questions for our HR team as led by Ms. Foster from my colleagues. So, Mr. DeFranti, would you like to start us?
Sure. I'm in the interest of time, I have one question regarding
trades, do I have it right? I don't know if this is for I think for you, Ms. Foster. Trades are across, it's not just DES, across all different areas. You could have, for your slide that had trades and planning and the different categories, they could be across organization-wide, not just in Department of Environmental Services.
Trades is primarily in DES and parks.
Okay, okay.
Planners go into a couple of other departments.
And then I wanted to see if I could ask, this is more a question for next year and perhaps for the manager. I wondered if you had any comment regarding this year's, it's the first time in well over a decade we've seen significant inflation. And I wondered if you'd had thought, as we approach next year, or, the COLA is an approach to funding that other places use, and I am pleased with the merit piece to it, but I wondered if you had just any brief remarks on this unique year because of 7 or 8%.
Thank you. The county board acted to provide a 1% COLA in January, so about 2 months ago, which is the first time I think we do a compensation summary in the front of the budget. I think that's the first time in at least 15 years, or maybe it's more like 12 years that we've done one. And I think there is a place for doing those in the future, realizing that since probably, see if I get this right, at least in the last 12 or 14 years, inflation has not been the kind of item that it is right now. So absolutely going forward, I think that's something, and you see it in some of our surrounding jurisdictions and see it here. We absolutely have to include that as part of what we're going to do and have the opportunity to do that going forward.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it, and I'm mindful that the late 70s was a whole different world that I didn't live through, but I certainly know, and I appreciate that prospectively and the reminder on the 1%. Thanks.
Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, thank you. Just go quick through a couple of quick questions. On the chart on the comparisons in the region, Loudon's not there. Is that because you just didn't have the information yet?
We have information on Loudon. They're not part of our pay philosophy as a normal comparison base, but we do have Loudon information, and we're happy to share that.
Okay.
I do know they're making a 3% range movement with a 3% COLA to public safety and a 3% merit increase for both general and public safety.
Okay, thank you.
But we can get that to you in another.
It's just, it may not be how we calculate it, but as far as people are looking, when they're looking for jobs, they don't look at that. Thank you. I'm glad to hear about the creating a pipeline with Northern Virginia Community College. I think that's really, that's good. I think we've been doing that for a while. How about our high school as well, Career Center? Are we starting the pipeline that early?
We do work with APS. We have a couple of students that are doing one of their student internships here in the recycling area, so they're in DES, but we do work with them. We just have to get managers who can work with their schedule. So these students go to school in the morning and then they come to work in the afternoon, so we have to find the jobs that work. So there are about 3 or 4 working in recycling right now, so we do try to stay with them. And then all the other colleges around here, but we have a lot of traction with Nova right now.
That's excellent, I think, particularly for the trades. And a question that maybe, if it's going to take too long to answer, don't. I should know this, I don't. Why does it take so long to do a pay compression study? I mean, it seems to me like the idea, how pay compression works, there's sort of a general principle to it, and that you could maybe go faster than some other studies. That just shows my ignorance, so.
No. The job family studies, which are a little bit different than the pay compression studies, you're looking at all the jobs and a number of classifications, and you're comparing them in the region, but you're working with the employees to get their perspective and the managers to get their perspective. Right. The compression, where everybody's bumping up on each other, you have to get hiring managers to bring people in at the right place, and they're a little afraid to bring new hires in above the existing employees, so then we have to go back and work with them to correct the pay for the existing employees. So it's not anything we're looking at countywide because we haven't had the funding to do so. We've been doing it as they come on board and managers are saying, hey, I got a real issue here because I have to bring my new hire in above the 5 people that they're going to work with. We kind of do them onesie, twosie. They don't take that long, but you're looking at a small group of people. one at a time.
So
If we
each
were to look
compression, you look at
countywide,
each one, okay. Because I was thinking there might be sort of a general.
We're doing the
overall look.
job family study, which is
That I understand.
pay
I understand how that.
and compression at
right.
the same time with the same staff. So
Okay.
it may slow things down a little bit.
Yeah, because I think the issue of compression is going to be a larger issue with more departments. That's my impression. I think that's
Well,
even what you
because
were
of the
saying
tight
here.
labor market, we're bringing
Right.
in people at higher pay than we have to in the past, so it's probably hitting everybody. And we wanted to start at the lower pay ranges so we can kind of work at the bottom and then move it all up.
Okay, thank you. And I think
You've got a
somebody was going
phone a friend.
Yes, was going to.
I was just going to say, part of what takes us time too is that we're working with two different systems. So if we are looking at a group of people, we go into one system because we're looking at education experience. We have to transfer that over and then pull what they have in our current system. So it's also takes longer because we don't have it all in one place. So.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you. Thank you for the thoughtful presentation. A lot to think about. I'm particularly concerned about our ability to actually hire in this market. So 46% down in applications. It's something that says a lot, and it limits our ability to actually choose if we get to have a choice. So my question is a little bit philosophical in this. So besides monetary compensation and benefits, et cetera, what other means do we have? What other levers can we pull? For example, are we thinking about, during the pandemic, I understand that the new sensitivity on, I'm sorry, this is not working very well. There's a new sensitivity on considering, for example, retirement, vacation benefits or for example, tuition assistance, things that, we may not be always at the bleeding edge in compensation, but we could consider other means to make this workplace a very attractive workplace for people who are exceptionally talented. So I didn't see that in here, so my question is whether we think around this.
No, that's a great question. It is not always about pay, and it may take a lot of little things that matter to different people. So the biggest requests we get and some of the challenges we face in negotiating new hires is there are more and more people who want to be 100% remote. That works for some jobs. It doesn't work for all jobs. We increased our vacation accrual last year at the bottom, so employees can accrue more vacation because that's meaningful to the new hires coming on board. They would like more flexibility, more time off. We've added floating holidays along the way. We've increased the tuition based on the current budget because we know that there are employees interested in getting 2- and 4-year degrees, and we don't have a big tuition bucket, so we've been able to nudge that up. So we do look at those little things, but their impact is not countywide, therefore a focus group of individuals. So we do occasionally negotiate vacation on hire. Sometimes when we have to bring somebody in at the top of the range, we may have to give them some additional vacation to make it meaningful for them. But it is going to take a lot of creativity going forward with the shrinking labor pool that we're faced with out there now. So we'll be looking at just about anything as possible these days because it's going to be really tough.
Thank you. Also, loyalty rewards. Who stays here for a while should be rewarded for that, right?
So we are, I know, at the board's request, we're looking at some things we can do with one-time money. So some longevity bonuses or some longevity rewards, which Fairfax uses in their public safety world now. So we are looking at some of those as well. So we can bring those forward to you in the next week or so.
Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Racino. Good. Okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I switched microphones and had the light go off. No problem, no problem. So, Ms. Foster, thanks a lot. I'll probably have a number of detailed questions that I won't bore you with today that I'll just submit in writing, but one top line that I'd love to have addressed, and it's spurred by looking at page 175 of the budget book and looking at the number of females and minority applicants that we have as part of our total job solicitation metrics there. And it reminds me of the barrier analysis from last year, which, identified that whites are more likely to be offered and hired for positions despite the applicant qualification pool. So I was wondering, two questions really stem from that. One, is there anything that we're doing in this budget, and maybe Mr. Drake can answer that, that reflects a different amount of training or rejiggering our hiring process to see that those results become more aligned with what would be expected based on the qualified applicant pool? And then two, would it be possible in future years to incorporate some more of those metrics from the barrier analysis in the budget book that we receive? While I appreciate having that information, it doesn't actually really tell me what I'm most interested in knowing. So I was wondering if in future years we could maybe think about using the critical measures in the budget book to more reflect some of the things that we've prioritized internally.
Okay, so I may ask Tamara to respond, and then Jason. One of the metrics we are looking at is the blind screening to get more applicants in the pipeline. I don't know if we've been doing it long enough to give you a measurable metric yet, but Tamara could talk to you about more of the targeted recruitments we're doing, including online job fairs and where we're posting jobs. Some of those metrics are hard to get because we require the applicant to tell us where they heard about us on their application, which may or may not come through, but there's certainly targeted recruitment. And if Tamara wants to talk a little bit, and then Jason can tell you about what we've done to get more people through the training programs.
So Marcy told you most of the things we're trying to do on the sourcing side, which is to keep increasing the number of applicants, minority and female applicants that apply, but you can see we already do a pretty good job of getting those qualified applicants. And then the blind screening was an attempt to get them at least to the first interview process. And then Jason, so my team's put, there was some multimedia resources, we put some little videos together to train hiring managers on best practices, including just being aware of any unconscious bias or anything like that. And then Jason's been working on a variety of training programs all around.
I'm good without Mike.
Well, for people listening at home.
It's millions that are watching.
Okay. So a couple of things from the barrier analysis that we pulled from there and that we were working on, but it attached to the barrier analysis nicely, are the training, the streamlining of the training process or the training application process. It used to go to points of contact out in the departments. Now those come directly to HR. So we cut out a middleman, so to speak. We still bounce them off each department, make sure, people are in the right classes and they shouldn't be in a different class. So we did streamline the training application process. The other piece that came out of the barrier analysis, and something Marcy had suggested a couple of years ago that we've been working on, is mandatory manager training. And a couple of the training classes in there are managing for equity and then also interviewing for equity and understanding that. And that's what Tamara was referencing.
Okay, terrific.
So that class, those are trained, that cohort is for all newly promoted and newly hired managers coming into the county. And then coming up in Q1, we will be taking that online to all existing managers as well.
That's helpful, thank you. And you've sort of hinted at my second question. One other thing that the barrier analysis revealed was that in promotions, we also had a similar unexpected results, with whites being disproportionately more likely to be offered promotion compared to Asians, Blacks, Latinos, and also males to females. So it's great that work is happening with those people who are hired. Question is, do we have any handle on anything that we might be able to do for the employee experience between that point of, being onboarded here in Arlington County to when people would go through the eligibility for promotion and hiring cycle? One possible explanation for the similarity of results that you see is that we have some blind spots and some unconscious biases at all levels that reward whites and males disproportionately. It can also mean that the experience while here at Arlington County does not allow people of color and women to be at a position where they're elevated through the promotional ranks. So without knowing exactly what the answer is, hopefully we're doing things to address kind of both angles.
A lot of that work is happening through the ERGs as well, where we look at the ERGs as a venue to kind of bring up some of the challenges out there that are hitting. We're seeing that in the barrier analysis as well. And then as those kind of come up and we look down the road and our planning, we're taking all those things into account.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great set of questions. I appreciate it. One very high-level question and then one tactical one for follow-up. I think it's often, it sort of seems to be truism that Arlington, in terms of our basket of benefits beyond compensation, has really leaned into some very compelling retirement benefits. And I think that really seems to be borne out in the slides you shared with us, right? Exactly, particularly with the amount of retiree healthcare that Arlington shoulders relative to others. It is interesting to me, however, and I know it's also that is a very big ship to turn, right? If we were to say that we're going to realign our basket, but recognizing, particularly on compensation increases, and in some areas where we're on compensation period, we've fallen behind the region. Or if there are other non-comp benefits that are maybe compelling as we seek to fill these positions. You've discussed, for example, paid time off, other benefits. Do we have a way of assessing among applicant pools, particularly at a moment of change like the one we're experiencing, what the most compelling benefits are to them? And if so, how would we go about assessing whether that basket of benefits we're offering, which again is so heavily weighted towards retirement, is the right one for recruiting the workforce of the future?
So that's a great question. We did ask new hires recently and a couple of years ago about what they were looking for when they came here, and outside of public safety, but maybe even within public safety as well, we're hiring more and more from the private sector. It's not necessarily a transfer from local jurisdiction to local jurisdiction. So the packages being offered from the private sector are very different.
Right.
So if we want to make them look more like the private sector, either using the same dollars or even using less dollars, we can structure something. But it is a big ship to turn, and then you have to be able to turn that ship with, the simplest thing is getting away from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan, and our employees are going to be able to invest their own money when it's been invested for them historically. But if you're moving people from the private sector, they've been doing that anyway, so how do we get on board? So years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we created a defined contribution plan with a group of employees. We had all kinds of focus group discussions, but we only offered it to our most senior employees because their fear was employees would not be ready to invest. So we got to get employees comfortable investing their own money. Some of it is the health spending account, and the health plan has them doing some of their own little investment as well. So how do we get them comfortable? Well, we have Voya on site. We have trainings for our employees, so we got to get employees comfortable investing, and then we got to make that offer available for more than just the most senior or most highly paid employees. So we've been looking at that, and I even have a public safety entity that's interested in that because employees may not be coming and staying in public safety for 25 or 30 years anymore. They might have a 5 or 10 or 15-year career, and they might be looking for a different package. So those discussions are underway, but it is a big ship to shift gears on. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. We're attracting a totally different workforce, and they're staying for different periods of time. So offering the more private sector-like package might be a way that we have to attract more employees into the organization.
That's great. I'm glad to know that you all are already thinking and gathering data and kind of focus grouping that and testing it as well. One question, and this is really, I think, a follow-up for the manager because I know that the Office of Human Rights is within your office. Great questions from or suggestions from the Human Rights Commission about the volume of work that team is handling. And I know, given the number of COVID accommodations, et cetera, it's been a real demand on them. Could you either now or just in follow-up, I know the vacancies that Chair Connolly mentioned were challenges. Could you give us a sense, again, follow-up is fine, about how many vacancies are currently there And, you know, if, as positions have been filled, how long they've been filled. I think we often have this conversation about what is the right mix of just making sure the positions we've got are filled before adding new FTE. So any insights you can give us on that?
Yeah, and I know Gurjeet is here. She can yell if I get it wrong. We have currently, as of today, 2 positions that are vacant in the office, and that office, like many other offices, has faced the challenge of recruiting. And I will say this, and I don't say very often, Gurjeet did come to me and ask for additional positions in the process. And my response was not quite yet, given that we're having problems filling. And I will say that I'm not ashamed of it, but I take prime responsibility for the fact that when we're one of 2 jurisdictions in Virginia, I think, who did the vaccine mandate. The bulk of that work, and it was hundreds of hours, fell on Gurjeet and Anna and her staff, their staff, and they have been pulled away from doing some of their other work, and there's just no getting around that. So I know I agree with Helen's point. I mean, those are valid points. There's plenty of work that we need to get to, but I think our first step needs to be to fill those 2 vacancies.
Thank you. And that presents a great opportunity to say thank you very publicly to Ms. Chima and Ms. Maynard and everyone who's been working really hard. I think we all consider that vaccine mandate to be a success story in helping this community combat the virus, but I know it came with just, as you said, Mr. Manager, hundreds of hours of work, and we really appreciate all that you've done. Okay, I think in the interest of time, we will move on to our remaining departments. Thank you so much, Ms. Foster, and to your team. We appreciate seeing you and may be following up in writing as well. Okay, so with the changing of the guards, I believe we are going to go next to the Department of Parks and Recreation, and I know Ms. Rudolph is here. We welcome you. And I'll note that our Parks and Recreation Commission, Forestry and Natural Resources Commission, and Sports Commission should be on deck. We look forward to hearing from you all. Good afternoon. Welcome. Unless our manager has any important words of introduction, we'll just give you a welcome and hand it over to you, Ms. Rudolph.
Great. Thank you so much. So good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. Today I'm joined by Becky Schmidt, our finance officer, and Angie Lucas, our department budget analyst. I want to thank them for all their work getting me prepared today. On Teams, I'm also joined by my leadership team, who you might hear from if you throw me a zinger. I would like to thank this team for all their amazing work over the past year to ensure our parks and programs are at their highest quality. We have had new members of that team, and I look forward to introducing them to you when we're together at a park event. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all the DPR staff for their hard work this past year. Things have not always been easy. We've had to pivot all the time, but this great group of park and recreation professionals always rise to the occasion, and I'm proud for the opportunity that I've had to lead this team. And finally, I want to thank Mark Schwartz and Michelle Cowan for their constant support and guidance. I'm lucky to call them my 2 bosses. So let's begin. On the next slide, you'll see our we had it there for a second. There we are. Great. So our next slide just shows our mission and our vision. Our mission is to promote wellness and vitality through dynamic programs and attractive public spaces. And our vision is that Arlington is the happiest and healthiest place to live, work, and play. And you can see a lot of that happening on this slide. Our next slide, this year, I just wanted to share some of DPR's highlights in a broader context of our departmental strategic plan. You'll see here that we have 6 goals that guide our work. Our first goal is about places and the spaces we provide. Last summer, in the span of 7 weeks, we opened 2 major facilities. First, in July 2021, we opened Love a Run, which has been bustling with activity ever since. We have full-day preschool, 55-plus programs, so many drop-in users in the gym, plenty of fitness users, and many more enjoying the surrounding park, and, of course, loads of pickleball players. In August 2021, we opened the Longbridge Aquatics and Fitness Center. I have a separate slide on that later in the presentation to go over some of the highlights since opening. But I do want to pause and thank all the staff involved from multiple departments that helped us to get these facilities opened. Each were a huge effort, and to open them during a pandemic and during DPR's busiest season was a huge lift, and I'm grateful for the hard work and dedication of my team that made it happen. Around the county, we currently have 25 capital projects underway in various stages, ranging from scoping and master planning all the way through design and construction. You'll hear more about these at the PAYGO work session in a few weeks, but when it comes to this goal, it's important to acknowledge them as well. On the very near horizon, both John T. Robinson Jr. Town Square and Jenny Dean Park are projects reaching completion in the next few weeks, and we are working with the Civic Association and other stakeholders to schedule the ribbon cuttings this spring. We also continue to prioritize our trail and bridge network. This is something you'll hear more about at the PAYGO work session. Our second goal is about programs and the services we offer. I'm taking this opportunity to share some details about our programs that have taken the longest to restart since the pandemic. After skipping our indoor winter basketball season last year, we wrapped up this incredible season this past weekend with nearly 4,500 participants from grades 1 through 12. In 5th grade alone, we had 56 teams. In Therapeutic Recreation, which are programs and services for people with disabilities, these have been critical programs to focus on over the last couple of years. One of our longtime adult participants remarked that throughout the pandemic, if it was not for our programs, both virtual and in person, they would not have anything to look forward to. Some of our programming is back in full force, such as the Teen Club, the TR Family Night Out, gymnastics, aquatics, arts and crafts, yoga, social clubs, campfires, and family special events, and we are pleased to see participation is exceeding pre-pandemic levels. Goal 3 focuses on natural and historical resources, and we are, as you know, we are well into our work on the Forestry and Natural Resources Master Plan update, our sub-element of the Public Spaces Master Plan, and we look forward to releasing the first draft with the companion public engagement opportunities this spring. Invasive plant control remains a key priority that we have been focused on for nearly a decade, and there's plenty more work for us ahead. To reorient you quickly, we have 2 bodies of work for this. First, active management, which is the more expensive phase as we address large-scale invasive plant removal. Second, the maintenance level management, which is the long-term work to ensure the invasives don't return. In FY12, the first year of the program, we were actively managing 63 acres. Today, 291 acres are managed, and we prioritize the parks with higher ecological value. We have many volunteers who help us with our invasive plant removal, and we thank them for their work. Regarding trees, I feel like I can't have a work session without trees. We have highlighted on the slide here that we distributed over 900 trees last fiscal year through the Tree Canopy Fund Grant Program and the Tree Distribution Program. DPR also plants hundreds of trees to minimize any overall net loss each year. Proper maintenance of our existing healthy mature canopy is the best way to keep our community healthy and beautiful. The $200,000 one-time additional funding for the tree maintenance that the board approved for our current fiscal year has had a great impact. It has allowed us to maintain nearly an extra 1,000 trees this year above our typical 1,000 per year. I also want to thank the board for the addition of the urban forester position that you approved to our team in FY 2022. This position enables us to keep up with the amount of work needed to protect and plant trees across the county. When it comes to protecting our resources, I should mention deer here as well. We conducted a deer study last spring, and findings from that are available on our website. We are in the next steps of developing an RFP to have a consultant conduct a deer management assessment for us later this year. Goal 4 focuses on building community, promoting wellness, and ensuring access to all. In regards to special events, I've always felt that the variety and the breadth of special events in Arlington that Arlington hosts and that Arlington holds each year are an indicator of what a diverse and healthy and fun community we live in. Last calendar year, 2021, we held over 120 special events. We found event organizers determined, as ever, to find ways to present community events that to present safe community events, being creative and resourceful while following all the safety protocols. We had many first-time events ranging from the Washington Nationals Opera's pop-up opera truck to drive-in movies in Columbia Pike and Ballston to various faith celebrations. And we have an exciting upcoming event later this month where DPR is partnering with the Cherry Blossom Festival to hold a kite festival at Virginia Highlands Park in coordination with Amazon, the National Landing Bid, and Aurora Highlands Civic Association. We also do community engagement. And you know that we do it in very different ways, from our front desk at our community centers to staff delivering programs and taking care of our parks. Our success is closely tied to how well we inform the community, and we listen to the feedback as we are given. Currently, we're engaging with the community members who use outdoor courts to support the growing interest in pickleball, while continuing to support tennis, basketball, and other courts. Later this spring, as I said, we will be doing the draft of the FNRP, and of those 25 capital projects I mentioned, many of them included community engagement. And throughout the pandemic, we have done all this engagement by meeting people where they are and in the way that they feel comfortable, offering in-person, virtual, and hybrid engagements. And finally, after losing our engagement manager to the county manager's office last summer, we are excited to welcome our new team member this month from DS. And I'm glad to say that we can retain county's talent and enable staff to take new challenges in new departments. Senior programs. Over the past 2 years, we've been dynamic in our program offerings, and our senior programs are a great example of this. Notably, we had twice the amount of participating attending virtual program options than as in in-person options. Just recently, during Omicron, our staff worked closely with program leaders and presenters to pivot from in-person programs to virtual. We saw an increase in activity in our virtual program YouTube channel with 800 views in 70 hours of watch time in January, compared to 450 views in 25 hours of watch time in December. Moving on to our goal about managing our assets. Last year, our Parks and Natural Resources Division conducted a comprehensive inventory of all the signs in our parks system, which were categorized, geolocated, and stored in our asset management system. We have begun a planning process to better manage our natural surface trails per the recommendation of the PSMP, and as a starting point, we are conducting an inventory and sustainability assessment of our natural trails. We are nearing completion of the final evaluation of parks through our asset management study, led by our PDD team, which we will use to update our capital asset database, and which in turn inform our maintenance capital program and define future CIP priorities. And finally, our sixth goal is about DPR workforce. Like many other departments, we too are facing large vacancies and significant hiring challenges. Right now, we have nearly 50 permanent positions vacant, or about 16% of our permanent FTEs. Before the pandemic, we typically had about 5 to 8% of our permanent FTE positions vacant at a given time. For our temporary positions, we are currently actively recruiting over 200 positions. Many of those are for summer camp staff, but also our seasonal park staff and various jobs in our athletic and facilities division. Some of our hardest positions to fill right now include lifeguards, both permanent and temporary, which I will talk about more on a later slide. But we've also had a hard time hiring preschool teachers, temporary preschool teachers, to fill that void where you're using other permanent staff and existing temps are working longer hours. Our forestry unit is finally coming close to being fully staffed after having quite a few vacancies. This is really helping us to be able to address open work orders across our system. And across the department, we continue to have several management analysts vacant. These positions provide significant administrative and behind-the-scenes operation support. Often we have to recruit for these positions several times because a top candidate will get another job during the interview process or no suitable candidate was found. And on the temporary staff side, we need to hire 190 summer camp counselors by May. At P&R, we need 16 temporary employees to run our operations at an ideal level during our busy season. We have interviewed and offered 12 positions, with 8 recently accepting, and we continue to recruit for the additional 8. Through all this, we continue to do training and development as a major priority for our department, although we have not been able to do as much as we would like because another hard-to-fill vacancy remains, as we have a vacant organizational development specialist position as well. So a lot to unpack there, but before I move into even more, I want to kind of go to the next slide and lay out, talk a little about summer camp registration. As you know, our summer camp registration on February 23rd did not go as planned. Our goal was to enable our customers to find affordable and accessible and engaging summer camps quickly and easily, and instead we had an unprecedented unprecedented failure of our online system that caused numerous problems, including delayed processing, canceled payments, and customers getting kicked out of the registration process. I've heard from many frustrated customers who depend on summer camp to meet their summer childcare needs, and we let them down. What happened is completely unacceptable. We hold ourselves accountable for the breakdown in the registration process. Addressing what happened and making certain it does not happen again is our highest department-wide priority. And as we know, the issue goes beyond just a technology solution. What has become frustrating on February 23rd was the technology fail, but what also became clear is that we have a high demand and not enough supply for certain camps and for certain age groups. Camps fill up so fast that there is barely an opportunity for anyone to get into all the camps they would like. And we don't have enough opportunities for those families that can't log on at 7 a.m. on a random day in February to get their kids into camp. To that end, we are in the process of conducting a wholesale review of what happened with the intent of designing a new registration process. The timeline shown here represents the major steps in that plan. I'm going to go walk through a few key milestones. Our first priority is getting kids into camp for this summer. By the end of the first day, February 23rd, we had 11,600 enrollments, 7,100 participants on the wait list, and 6,000 available slots. As of this Sunday, that number is now up to 12,800 enrollments, 8,800 wait lists, and 5,700 available slots. To help to respond to customers' needs, we've added 900 more slots, 470 in our contracted run camps, and 430 in our DPR run camps. We have also set aside 4,400 slots across a variety of our DPR run camps for families who may need our camps for their kids, but either are unaware of our services or cannot register. We work with our partners at DHS and APS to fill these slots. To help inform the future process improvements that we've already begun in after action of the registration process, documenting what happened leading up to the 23rd, what happened the day of, and the steps we took immediately following the event. We are working closely with our vendor, Vermont Systems, as they perform a root cause analysis of their system performance. Within minutes of the registration system failure, we contacted our vendor and have been in constant contact with them ever since. As a first step in making operational changes to the way we structure our registrations, we have separated our Spring Enjoy registration, which is tomorrow, into 3 different groupings with 3 different start times, rather than the typical 2 to reduce the system load. This month, we are also kicking off a full-scale evaluation of the registration process with 4 key areas of consideration: communications, technology, operations, and access and equity. We have begun a benchmarking exercise of local jurisdictions, both within the region and nationwide, to understand the operational and technology approaches similar organizations are using so we can compile some best practices. This spring, we will have engagement opportunities for both our staff and the public to get feedback on what's working and what's not. And with this information from our after-action report, the benchmarking data, and the input from our staff and the public, we will develop a plan for summer 2023 camp registration. Since summer camp planning starts immediately after the prior summer ends, our goal is to have that recommendation on next steps by September 2022. During the same timeframe, we will be working with purchasing and DTS, and we will begin a broad evaluation of the technology that supports our registration process. This work is intended to inform our long-term decision-making. And while we won't be able to implement a new system for summer 2023, this is a long-term project that we can keep you all posted about. Also, after summer 2023 and beyond, we will conduct after-action reviews to ensure that we are constantly iterating our registration process to ensure that we're meeting our program registration goals to provide affordable, accessible, and engaging camps quickly and easily. To pivot, I just want to spend a second on our DPR focus on race and equity. Since our last work session, we've made steady progress in our journey towards centering racial equity within the department. Focusing first on normalizing the conversation around race and equity, we have conducted several facilitated department-wide dialogues and trainings, including several in Spanish, to ensure that all our employees could fully participate. The goal being to move beyond the intentions and break down assumptions so that when we operationalize our goals, we have an impact. We also established an interdepartmental race and equity core team to help us implement the work of race equity within the department. As our engines have changed, the core team will be responsible for coordinating the implementation of the department's racial equity plan, policy review, and revisions across all functions, and encourage consistency of analysis methods and trainings. We've also made some targeted changes to improve access to our programs. Specifically, DPR transitioned some traditionally fee-based programs to free programming that serve all ages and abilities, like outdoor skate, movies on the deck, 55-plus nature hikes and walking groups, and more. To reduce transportation barriers, all free programs in the park were strategically placed in locations where the community had easy access, whether they were driving, walking, biking, or taking public transportation. We also introduced all-day preschool at the centrally located Lover Run Community Center in September 2021, which has been wildly successful. And in response to the demand for these slots, we plan to open all-day preschool at Gunston this fall. Recognizing our plans, policies, and programs can have an impact on the distribution of benefits or burdens in our community, our path forward will include applying an equity lens to our programs and services to ensure improved equity outcomes. Currently, the core team will be assessing department programs and policies, starting first with our language translation policy. Similarly, as we update the FNRP, our focus will be to craft policy recommendations that connect natural resources to those who have been historically overlooked and underserved by discriminatory policies and practices. Okay, so now on to the budget. So thank you for letting me give that little introduction. So the county manager's proposed budget includes nearly $52.3 million in expense budget for DPR and $15 million in revenue budget, with position count nearly at 415 that are filled by permanent and temporary staff. For expense, I'll get into the key changes on the next slide, but one change I'll mention here is the addition on both the expense and the revenue side of $1.1 million, which is a net tax support neutral change. You will recall that for Summer Camp 2021, we moved the contracted registration in-house. This is a budget adjustment to reflect that change. Beyond that, I'll get into a few other related items in a later slide as well. And finally, for our staff, in this total number, there's just over 311 permanent staff positions, and the remaining 100 are temporary staff positions. So now on to some key changes in the budget for DPR. First, we have the addition of two remaining FTEs to fully staff Lover Run Community Center. As you know, Lover Run opened last summer, but we opened it with less than the full staffing model planned recognizing that there were budget constraints. We are pleased to see this year's proposed budget includes funding to bring the two additional positions, an assistant facility manager and a customer service representative. Secondly, also at Lover Run is an adjustment to the funding for our all-day, year-round preschool program. Since we launched the successful program, we've identified some necessary adjustment to the staffing model, namely converting some temporary staff support to two permanent part-time positions, which we think will help us attract and retain staff. Our third key budget change is the addition of two new athletic field maintenance staff. This change is the direct result of the recommendations out of the Field Fund Working Group, which was formed in the fall of 2020 by the Sports Commission to examine the fee-setting methodology to determine how fee revenue should be allocated and what amounts the fees should be. The working group included members from the Sports Commission, Park and Rec Commission, FAC, Partnership for Youth and Family, and DPR staff. And the group completed their work in early 2021, and the Sports Commission chair briefed you on their efforts at our work session last year. The key findings they highlighted last year were, one, that the fees in Arlington charges are lower than our peer jurisdictions, and two, that Arlington is spending less on field maintenance than our peer jurisdictions. The addition of the two staff is net tax support neutral, as the change in the fee structure is expected to generate up to $240,000 in additional revenue beyond the $220,000 proposed budget. There is a one-time net tax support impact this year for the purchase of a vehicle and other equipment to support the new staff. These fees are outlined in the DPR fee resolution. Before I move on from this item, let me take a moment to thank the board for your continued investment and support of our athletic fields over the years. In FY2020, you added $139,000 into our contractual and supplies budget for field maintenance, and that addition was confirmed as ongoing change in our current budget for FY2022. The remaining three changes here are added for a few key positions. First, an administrative assistant in the Community Recreation Division serving youth and family needs. This is zero net tax support impact as we are reallocating temporary staff dollars to support this change. Second is an FTE authorization for an additional plumber to support existing large body of work that our current one plumber on our team cannot cover alone. We currently must pull staff from other areas of the division to help respond to plumbing work requests and general plumbing maintenance work. DPR will work to identify funding within our existing budget to fund this FTE. And finally, a civil engineer. This is stormwater funded, and I know that the DES director discussed this in his work session earlier this month. We want to highlight it here in our work session as this is related to a request brought forward from DPR to have an engineering position that can support our team with stormwater management work specific to the park system. So in addition to the general fund support changes that I discussed, we also have a few items being supported by ARPA funding. First is the ongoing funding to allow our 55-plus programs to continue to provide emergency meal distribution. Early in the pandemic, we were delivering meals to our seniors when our centers were closed and we could not provide the congregate meal program. Although we are open, we continue to see the value in providing seniors with take-home meals. That way we know our participants have a few meals on hand from us if they cannot come to one of our centers due to illness or weather, for example. Second, as a result of ARPA funding, we're excited to begin offering all-day preschool at Gunston beginning in the fall of this year. The slide here shows the ARPA funding will support $100,000 of funding needed to make this program net tax support neutral for now, with the remaining expense budget of $170,000 offset by the standard fees we charge for this program. And then there are two other items that are one-time funding commitments. The first is for what we call TREC, the Therapeutic Recreation, Education, and Knowledge, which allows our team to visit group homes and provide opportunities for meeting participants where they are. And the second resides in the county's non-departmental account because it is shared between DPR and DES to convert our team's handheld landscaping tools away from gas-powered. DPR uses a variety of handheld landscaping tools to provide our daily operations, and this ranges from brush cutters, tree trimmers, leaf blowers, string trimmers, and at this point, about 20% of our inventory is battery-powered, and the rest is gas-powered. Our plan over the next 4 years will be to transition 100% of the remaining gas-powered handheld tools to battery. We need the next few years to transition our inventory, given that to give the industry time to catch up with our operational needs. An example of operational considerations include, for example, during leaf season, which runs 6 to 8 weeks during the fall, we must clear leaves across many of our parks. To put this in perspective, a mature oak has anywhere from 200,000 to 500,000 leaves. Large parks with heavy tree cover can take 4 to 6 hours with multiple passes to manage the fall leaves. Battery-powered packs are harder for our staff to use over long periods of time because they concentrate the weight of the equipment in one area rather than distributing across the body like a gas-powered models do. They also require multiple battery swaps. In some cases, don't handle the removal of wet leaves with the same power as a gas-powered blower. Nevertheless, the transition to battery-powered landscape equipment is important to us, and we are committed to reach this goal. Over the long term, we'll be looking for opportunities to continue to convert our utility fleet to electric, while also keeping an eye towards increasing our work efficiency. For example, this year we transitioned from a gas-powered push mower to a battery-powered ride-on mower, which enables us to cover more area in less time and do it more sustainably. Going forward, we will be evaluating opportunities when the technology is available to convert other drivable and non-drivable equipment like our toolcat, which combines several machines into one. To move on to revenue, our revenue budget is proposed with most revenue sources estimated at pre-pandemic levels. In our FY21, our revenue was still seeing significant impact from COVID, but we also had lower expense associated. For our current fiscal year, we are estimating to come to much closer to our overall $13.9 million budget. And for that, the trend will continue for FY2023. Another indicator that our participation levels are really returning this year. We have already provided $550,000 in fee reductions to a little over 1,000 households. Pre-pandemic levels, we were providing over $900,000 a year to 1,700 households. And just quickly, I'll highlight a couple adjustments to our fee resolution this year. For our gymnastics teams, the fee resolution reflects updates to the overall program structure, including some additional hours and associated fee increases. This adjustment was made in coordination with the Parent Booster Association. And then the field fund updates that I talked about earlier will also be reflected in that fee schedule. So now I move on to the busiest slide of my presentation. I know there's a lot going on here, but we really wanted to share some exciting and variety of different information about Longbridge. So I've spent a lot of time in these work sessions over the years talking about how Longbridge is on the horizon, and so finally we get to talk about it being open, which is pretty cool. It's been open for nearly 7 months, and I want to take this opportunity to share with you how it's been going. So first of all, it's getting a ton of use. We have had over 62,000 swipes into our facility since we opened. We have generated $680,000 from our membership and pass sales. Our most popular options are proving to be the 10-visit and the 25-visit passes. We have sold over 3,200 memberships and pass options, generating anywhere between $10,000 to $20,000 in revenue on a weekly basis. And we have sold about 3,000 to 5,000 worth of day passes each week. We've offered over 400 classes in our fall and winter programs and served over 3,500 participants. And with all those programs, overall revenue from activity in the facility is nearly $1 million, against a total budget of $1.4 million. So we're really tracking well with respect to revenue. The revenue stream chart at the bottom left gives a sense of what's coming in, 30% for programs, 70% for membership. And of course, fee reductions apply. We've already extended over $40,000 in fee reductions. We are budgeted for expense for up to $3.7 million. Through February, we've only spent $1.4 million. We anticipate some savings due to staff challenges, and we continue to grow into our non-personnel spending, such as contractual and supply needs. Whatever amount we spend beyond revenue generated will be offset by a portion of the Boeing company funding. The budgeted amount this year is $2.4 million, and for FY23, it's $2.2 million. Talking about the expense brings me to where we have some challenges: staffing. The staffing issues are particularly difficult at Longbridge, as we, like the rest of the region and the country, struggle to hire lifeguards. We are still actively recruiting 8 to 10 lifeguards, and we currently have 16 lifeguards on staff, including 2 head lifeguards. Additional lifeguards will allow us to offer more hours on the slide, roll out birthday parties, expand diving opportunities, not to mention to allow our head lifeguards to dedicate more time to other essential job functions and their responsibilities, including training, scheduling, and developing policies and procedures. Beyond lifeguards, we have 7 vacant permanent positions, 6 of which are actively being recruited. The general manager, a second maintenance technician, 2 out of our 4 lead aquatics instructors, and the aquatics program manager. An additional lead aquatics instructor is being reviewed to reclassified to become an instructor and a lifeguard. So amidst all of this, and like I opened, the facility is busy. The energy is great. Family playtime on the weekends extremely popular, as is our 50-meter lap swimming. Plenty of people are upstairs in the fitness room as well. And the USO partnership is working well. Each month they provide a roster of 400 participants from their lottery system. On the horizon is adding birthday parties and exploring rental opportunities. You may remember we'd always planned to wait on rentals until a year or so of living into the center to see how the community was using the facility. So finally, this slide shares some of the key budget considerations for DPR going forward. I think I've kind of talked a lot about the vacancies, so you know it's a challenge. And to sort of touch on Longbridge for a second, we are really fortunate to have the Boeing company funding, which has allowed the facility to be net tax support neutral over the next several years. And while we continue to increase revenue opportunities, it's important to highlight that the fee structure was not intended to generate enough revenue to make the facility fully net tax support neutral. The program within the facility utilizes DPR's cost recovery philosophy, recovering direct costs and a portion of overhead. But other fees like membership and day passes are based on significant benchmarking efforts and engagement efforts conducted by the Longbridge fee working groups. So this will be a future conversation for us. And as we do every year, we will be coming to you later this spring to provide an update on our PSNP implementation efforts. Some of our future work is in relation to the PSNP will have financial impacts both on the operating budget and in the CIP. And similarly, our FNRP will have financial impacts as we act on the recommendations once the plan is approved. And finally, contract price increases. The cost of doing business continues to rise, and this is not a unique challenge to DPR, but it can be an impactful one to our department. As the most current example, in the 2023 budget proposed for DPR a base budget change of $680,000 related to contractual increases. 70% of this increase is due to one contract, our mowing contract. We have seen this over the years, where every 5 years, when some of our large dollar contracts come up to be rebid, we encounter significant price increases. To be clear, these are price increases where the scope of service has not materially changed, just the cost of doing business for the same services continues to rise. Year-over-year increases are somewhat limited during the time period of the contract, so when we rebid contracts is when we see significant jumps. So with that, I just want to thank you all for taking the time to hear me, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Great, thank you so much. We look forward to asking them. First, let me invite a couple of speakers from our commissions. I believe we have Mr. Howell, the chair of our Parks and Recreation Commission. David Howell, are you with us on the line?
I am here. Thank you very much.
Hello,
Ms.
sir.
Chair.
Welcome.
I am not the chair of the commission, but I'm representing the commission today.
Forgive me. Thank you very much.
So thank you. Yeah, I think you all should have received a letter from PRC in the last couple of days, and I won't repeat that, but I'll just highlight the things in the letter. The first thing I want to say is that we all thank the DPR employees for their very innovative and stellar service in the last 2 years. We mentioned it in last year's letter as well, but it's been an amazingly difficult time and an amazing time in terms of DPR's performance and response to the needs of citizens in the county, with some major achievements, as were already mentioned by Director Rudolph on the highlights page, but just day to day with the innovative responses to program delivery. It's just amazing. And we're really quite lucky to have that kind of staff. And of course, this starts with the leadership team. So I'll just leave it at that. I hope you all know what you have in that group. Not because of that, but related to it, we do very much support the compensation increases and changes that have been proposed in the manager's budget. And, we've heard time and time again about difficulties in hiring and we all know about the cost of living here. So that all totally makes sense. And in addition, we support fully all of the increases, staffing increases, as were just highlighted, so I won't repeat it. And the additional funding for certain initiatives that are very important, even if they might appear to be minor, such as going electric on the maintenance equipment. Among other things, all of the avid birders in Arlington will be very happy to have get rid of the gas leaf blowers that make so much noise and ruin their mornings. Now, getting down to the key issues that we're concerned about is that I think we feel now, with increased density in the county, increased awareness and appreciation by citizens for the natural resources we have and the pressure on them and the importance of them in a biophilic community that's entertaining new planning policies for density. We really have to kick it up a notch in terms of the protection, the conservation of the natural resources we have. There are constant threats, and I can just give you very quickly some categories. In addition, just to the population pressure on the spaces we have, the storm wind and storm rain, storm water impacts. A lot of our natural areas are in the riparian corridors, so that's a challenge. Intentional tree removal either for safety or for development, but it's still tree removal. Diminished natural replacement mechanisms such as understory growth and other protections of the smaller trees and saplings that will become our future forests. most all of our ecosystem here is one or another type of oak-based forest, and so without the trees as the anchor, our ecosystem is, in most parts of the county, is already under duress. So we really have to keep that balance. Weather extremes, of course, which may be climate change based. Most people would think so, but that can help contribute to sort of broader changes, such as the recent oak decline, where we've lost probably hundreds. I'm sure that Vincent can provide information on that, but we've had a severe impact of some very, very important sort of core tree resources, and of course invasive species. And so it gets down to the recommendations that we're making, which we believe are very much worth the investment. And the first is on the invasive species program, which is doing well, but it needs to be beefed up to do more faster. You can't repair your roof doing a portion of the roof at a time over years and years and years without have a lot of backsliding and damage from doing it too slowly. And I feel like an infusion sooner will save more in the long run, and also more quickly put us in a place where our natural spaces are truly more natural to our ecosystem. So we're talking about fairly minor funding increases, but funding increases that would be very important and measurable in accelerating that program. Second is the tree canopy study. We need to study a lot of things about our environment and ecosystem. We need to do it more systematically and more fully in a comprehensive way. But the core of it, again, because the core of our ecosystem is trees, the core is the tree canopy study, and we just really need to do another one now. It's will be 6 years since the previous. That's not fast enough with the rate of changes that we're facing. And finally, the conservation and interpretation program, with important changes in the nature center, which is where their offices are. The nature center opening hours right now, with having a minimum of 2 staff on, in the offices anytime it's open, and we totally agree with that. But there aren't enough staff to do all of the different programs, all of the different places in the county, and then also maintain the nature centers being open all the hours that one would expect for people who are going on weekdays, and that goes all the way from young children, preschool children, kids after school, adults of all ages, people who are otherwise not occupied during part of the day, which, as you can be aware, is a lot more people now than it was a few years ago. People have flexible schedules. They like to go out and see our natural spaces and visit places like the nature center. So we need to have a sufficient staffing level that we do not have to have those closed because one person is out doing a field trip, one person is doing a presentation at a school, and they can't leave it with the third person there by themselves, so you have to close.
Mr. Howell, thank you so much. You've done,
Yes.
I think, added a lot of texture to those 3 major recommendations from the commission. I'm going to see if we can't wrap up there, just given that we do have a couple more commissions, and we're hoping to keep this at the 5 o'clock hour. Am I cutting you off before any final recommendations?
No, that was my final sentence, actually.
Fabulous. Oh, wonderful. Okay, then we are on the same wavelength. Thank you so much. And thank you to Chair Koopa for that really thoughtful letter that we've received from you all as well. We appreciate your subject matter expertise on this topic, as well as your representation of the commission. Okay, I'm going to welcome next Mr. Klingelhofer and then Mr. Mingus from the Sports Commission. If you all could maybe keep comments to about 5 minutes, you would certainly be helping us out, although we very much appreciate the perspectives that you bring on behalf of your commissions as well. So Mr. Klingelhofer, if you're ready, we'll have you go first.
I am. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you on a very busy workday for you all. First, I too want to acknowledge the very hard work and during extraordinary times by Ms. Rudolph and her staff at all levels, managing and protecting our wonderful parks and our precious natural resources, providing meaningful nature education to the public, and perhaps most importantly, planning for our future. Thank you. Forestry and Natural Resources Commission met in February and discussed the county's upcoming fiscal year 23 budget. We understand this is a very tight budget, and proper compensation for county staff is an important priority, which we strongly support. We do think we can point out a few areas where a modest increase in funding will make a huge difference for Arlingtonians. These areas are as follows, and this will mirror somewhat what David Howell also proposed, so I'm going to shorten it. But we do support increased funding for the removal of invasive species. The program has been funded at the level of approximately $100,000 yearly for 10 years, and currently about 2/3 of that program goes to active management or removal of plants, and another 1/3 goes for maintenance of the previous efforts. And some increase in that funding will allow us to tackle more of the new work that needs to be done while maintaining the management, ongoing maintenance of areas that have already had the invasives eradicated. So we support that. A second thing we also support is funding for a tree canopy survey. We asked the county to do this, a new survey, because the last one was completed in 2017. And for us to move forward, we have to be able to know where we are, where changes are occurring, and then plan to address those changes. A survey will also get at the issue of equity, that is, the extent to which trees are being disproportionately lost in lower income or historically disadvantaged neighborhoods. So, moreover, the county should consider similar recurring future funding for surveys about the status of other natural resources such as water quality, erosion, and biodiversity. We believe these modest sums will allow the county to tailor strategies for conserving and enhancing the natural gifts that we now enjoy. A third area is to provide funding for execution of a plan to address the results of the deer survey. We noted in our letter of 2020 that while deer are delightful to see in the wild, when the populations are too high, they are very destructive to trees and the natural habitat that's precious to all wildlife, and even deleterious to the deer themselves. We applaud the county for having funded a deer survey last year, and now, however, we will need to do something about the overpopulation of deer that the survey identified. We note that most other nearby jurisdictions have used similar surveys and have adopted measures for dealing with overpopulation of deer. We ask that the budget include funding to develop and move forward with an action plan to address the results of the survey and protect our precious natural resources. And the last item I want to raise is also focused on nature center staffing because of the new policy that was introduced requiring the minimum of 2 county staff to be on site whenever the nature center is opened. We agree this is a wise policy for the public and for staff, but it can limit the delivery of very popular and important programming to the public. Makes program scheduling complicated and subject to change, and inequitably impacts those whose age or capability favors visiting nature centers when they are less busy. We strongly support a robust active educational outreach effort to support the county's goals for protecting natural areas and our tree canopy, and our steps to include biophilic principles throughout the county. We believe the county should provide some increased funding for nature center positions and continue to look at scheduling options to best meet the needs of the broader community. I want to stress that none of our suggestions should cost huge sums. Each, however, would significantly enhance citizens' ability to use our natural resources. And next year, after adoption of the updated Forestry and Natural Resource Master Plan, we will likely have additional budget requests to support the elements of that plan. I thank you for the opportunity to present the FNRC recommendations, and of course, I'm delighted to answer any questions you or your staff may have, either here or later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Klingelhofer. We appreciate that. And finally, Mr. Mingus, on behalf of the Sports Commission, welcome. We're glad to have you. Look, of course, I didn't even process. Welcome.
Thank you. It just was easier with my day to come here and... Great. Thanks. Let me also say I heard your comments earlier, and I'm trimming down my remarks to get under to keep it. You said 5. I think I might give you as many as 3 of those back.
Okay, awesome.
In that case, I have some requests. Thank you for the opportunity to come talk about the DPR budget today, especially the sports-related aspects. I got to say, from my bottom line is I'm very pleased. Especially, I'm most supportive of fully staffing Lubber Run to get those activities up to speed. Pay increases for the staff. Everybody else has said what an amazing job they've done during these times. It's been great. Also, the maintenance staff that are being added by the field fund. The field fund, that staff is needed. I think arguably there's a case to make for some more, and we'll talk about that, and I'll get to that in a second. Also, we're excited about some of the opportunities, from Lubber Run and Longbridge, and also the projects that are coming online. I mean, my personal is the TJ Upper. Turfing that project when it comes online is going to create another great option for field space. I'm not going to talk about the field fund very much. The Sports Commission sent a letter about a week ago, fully expressing our support for the project or for the field fund. So I'm going to sort of skip that part for now. If you have questions, I'm here, and also Shirley Brothwell, my predecessor, is here in case there are questions I don't have the answer to. With all that being said, I do have one area of concern in the budget, and this is in the area of aquatics. As you know, the DPR budget continues to include a transfer of roughly $400,000 to APS for DPR programming in the pools. However, with the opening of Longbridge and changes in APS policy, there is effectively no DPR programming going on in the pools at this time. I mean, in fact, DPR is actually paying a rental fee of approximately $100,000 in order to get pool time, for the Arlington Aquatic Club. So from my perspective, that $400,000 should be reprogrammed to other resources within DPR. Perhaps what my colleague from the Tree Commission noted, or additional maintenance staff someplace else other than that transfer. And the last thing I want to say is we did look at the fee proposals and we support those as well.
Terrific. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And thank you truly for all of the work that you've done as part of that field fund, the commission, the super group that brought together commissioners from not only sports, but the partnership and many others. It's really great to see that bearing fruit in a better organized system that we hope will serve many. We appreciate you. Okay, the conversation is now with the board. I'm going to see if we can't do this maybe in around 20 minutes or so we don't give our library friends short shrift. I'm looking around to see who might like to start with questions. Ms. Garvey, I think you get the honor of the first.
Yeah, just so an overall general topic that I'd like you to talk about a little bit is the role of volunteers. I think there's been an up and down on the number of volunteers that are used, and I think you talked about a new community engagement person being hired. Do you want to just talk generally about how you see volunteers kind of helping out with the whole department? You've got a lot going on. By the way, I'm amazed again when I look through the budget, everything that goes on with Parks and Recreation. So obviously you could talk a long time about it, but just sort of generally what you're thinking about.
Also, generally speaking, as you noted, we have a lot happening in our department, and as a result, we have volunteers that are in so many different aspects of our different lines of business. So we have lots of volunteers who help out in our natural areas, both with trees, with invasive plant removal, with programming in our various Parks and Natural Resources projects. So with that, we have park stewards, and we have a lot of nonprofit partners like Armin, Tree Stewards, Park Stewards, RIP, who all sort of help us with the volunteers. And then we also have volunteers on our programming side, which is, anywhere from an extensive senior adult council and volunteer program in all of our senior centers, to all the volunteer coaches who come into our basketball program, our flag football program, and other programs that we have. So our volunteer network is extensive, and large, and this year our biggest task was making sure that all of their vax cards were in, as we had to have all of our volunteers need to show proof of vaccination to volunteer with us. And that was sort of a big effort for this year. And I actually just want to also highlight, we bring in student volunteers in the summer as part of our summer camp program. So we also, our volunteers are of all ages. I think we could do a better job, to be honest, of working to sort of capture some of information about how many volunteers we have, because it's really, you may recall a couple of years ago, we actually cut our volunteer office in one of the big sort of years of cuts a few years ago. We've just developed different ways in which we've been tracking our volunteers to be able to do it in-house. But I do think that there is always more we can do with our partners and with our volunteers to be more efficient and to provide sort of more resource to them.
Thank you. And the reason I brought up the question was really wondering about that cut. Is that something that ought to be revisited, possibly? You labeled all of the different volunteers you've got, and maybe not. Maybe it's all distributed and that works best, but it seems like a crucial item for you actually is volunteers.
So I appreciate that, and I would say for the next fiscal year budget, I can work with my team and county manager's office to see, I think the way we did it in the past wasn't efficient. And so if we were to ask for additional resources for volunteer management, I kind of want to spend a little time sort of seeing where our gaps are.
Okay, thank you. And I'll yield now and have some other questions. I just think a lot of what you do is so, anyway, as I say, volunteers can really, really help. And there's no way we can do it all with staff, and we are dependent on volunteers.
That is very true.
Yep, and we got a lot of people who want to volunteer. Okay, done.
Thanks. Mr. DeFrendi.
Thank you. I have just one question, so others will continue, but I do have a couple of comments. I appreciate the chance to follow up in writing on and to have a short conversation. I believe it's next week on the tree canopy study and the leaf blower piece, just so I understand. I want to focus. The question is really on the summer programs. First, I want to thank you for your comments. Being accountable and responsible. I really appreciate that. I want to also thank you for already taking the steps of the 3 different timeframes for the camps. And I want to underscore and just add my thoughts on the equity lens that is so critical to apply to the summer camps. I want to see if I can understand underneath. There's a significant, just over $1 million in increase for next year. And you mentioned the supply challenge and how this is childcare for some, but it's also meeting all of the supply challenge for every different type of camp is different. So in that $1 million in increase, is it sort of you're taking part of the approach is to address the supply issue, and part of the approach is, of course, to address the administrative issue? I would imagine that we might not be able to get to all of the supply problem that Arlington residents might have. So wondered if you could just talk a little bit to what the $1 million attempts to do, underlying ideals, both administrative and then how much of the supply problem would we be able to get to? Because I want to be fair.
So the $1 million is not related to that. That $1 million is related to, as you may recall, in summer 2021, we used to have a contracted camp program, but the contracted camps, families had to register for that separately. The registration was not done by DPR. When COVID came and we had that first summer of 2020 and we had to shut down camp, we realized that our contracted camps did not have a consistent and equitable way to refund parents across the board in the same way that DPR did. And they had different policies about how they did the refunds. The solution to that, and when we benchmarked against other jurisdictions, was to bring those contracted camps into DPR. When we brought them into DPR, you'll see it's not just $1 million on the expense side, it's also $1 million on the revenue side. So basically, we are taking in funding from parents who are registering for these contracted camps, and then we have contracts with these camps, and we pay them back as a result of the service that they provide, and that's why it is net tax support neutral. So that funding is related to that change that we did in the last fiscal year, and it's now reflected in our budget.
Thank you for clarifying, correcting, and I apologize for not having looked at the whole piece of it. and I can either yield or ask now, there is a question about those underlying.
Well, I wanted to follow up on that, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. DeFranti, because I do think, certainly that narrative got very quickly established that there was a dramatic shortage of summer camp slots for students who need them. And I noted when you were describing it, Ms. Rudolph, you talked about there's not enough supply for certain camps and certain age groups. And so I just want to take a second and establish, what we know to be sort of the actual nature of the issue. Is it that there is an across the board shortage or delta between availability and demand for camps? Or is the issue that there are certainly we know the most popular camps and the Enjoy classes, as we were talking about, which go live tomorrow, always in short demand. But help us understand when we say there is kind of a supply problem or a shortage, what exactly that means. Is it across the board? Is it in certain areas? And how do we know?
Great. So as you saw in my talking, or heard from me, my talking points, we have large enrollments, we have large wait lists, and we also have large slots available. So what that means is that there are still obviously camps available, but they may not be. There's two factors. There's the weeks that people are in camp. So we have certain weeks that are much more popular than other weeks. We also have certain age groups that are more popular. Sort of the older toddler to elementary age is incredibly popular. On the contracted side, we have certain contracted camps that are more popular. Some of the sports camps, some of the robotic camps are more popular than, say, a chess camp, for example, although my kids have done chess camp, so I can use that as an example. So that said, we have to look at each year, what can we do to increase those slots in those areas that we see the demand. Okay. And so particularly our DPR provided camps for the elementary age, I think we really need to look into can we provide more? And I think can we is really important because, as I said, also noted, we need to hire a ton of camp counselors, and that too continues to be similar to lifeguards in terms of that recruitment issue. It's a big issue across the region, and so we all are continuing to look at innovative ways. I have heard from parents who are interested in us doing a lottery system. I think the lottery system still recognizes that they may not get into camp, but they feel that maybe more an equitable approach. I was actually just talking to the DC director, and he's also looking at potentially doing a lottery system. Mm-hmm. We're looking again at opportunities to really stretch out registration, because another thing we hear is unlike sort of some of the class programs, this is your summer, and summer is 10 weeks. So sometimes a parent could be logging on with 3 kids for 10 weeks. That's 30 camps. That's a lot to try to get in when a lot of our camps fill up within the first 5 minutes. So we're also looking, should we be, doing it out by different types of programming, different ages? There's a lot for us to consider. I don't want to sort of delve too far down, but some of our age program camps are different depending on the program. For example, a sports camp that we have likes to be able to have a huge age range so that siblings can attend. Some of our camps are more for elementary age. So how do you break? So we just have to work through these types of things. This is what we're going to be doing. Okay. But we realize that we need to potentially, within our own programs for toddlers and for elementary, can we offer more? And that is something we're going to be looking into. And I think this spring, how many counselors we can hire will be a good indicator of that as well.
Is there any mechanism in real or semi-real time to say, for example, there is as you were saying, there's a huge amount of supply, right? So, there are hundreds of spots in, say, those middle school age, hypothetically, chess camps, right, that are going unfilled, but we know the wait lists have gotten really long for that kind of early childhood or early elementary camps. Is there any ability in real time to say we're going to, reprogram some of the staff that we do have available or space that we do have available to meet that need? Or is it because the hiring decisions and programmatic decisions are already set, we can't really shift around like that?
So 2 things. One is harder to, because some of these are contracted camps. So it is a contractor who provides a specific type of sports camp. There's a tennis contractor camp, there's a basketball, and so you can't switch that out. Yeah. But I did note that both our contractors, and I really would thank them, they have stepped up to provide almost 470 more slots, and my own team has also stepped up to figure out, can we offer another 430 slots in our different camps. So we are trying to find our slots. We have an amazing customer service unit who have been on the phone nonstop since February 23rd, trying to call families to get them into the camps that they want to be in. So we are working diligently to continue to doing this. I think I may have mentioned to you at one point, Ms. Crystal, another thing we need to look at is our cancellation policies. We have always in the past had a very sort of loose cancellation policy, which basically means that you don't need to cancel without any recourse until almost the week before, which means that we will have a camp that is so booked and huge wait list, and then we find out like a couple of days before that there is 3 people dropped out, and the people who had been on that wait list no longer want the spot. We knew this was an issue, but with COVID, we purposely did not change it because we didn't want to burden and impact families. So we know as part of this review that we have to do a much stronger policy that has sort of select dates, May 1st, if you're not going to do it, you get penalized by this month, and then starting to do that as we get closer to camp each week. This is very common, I think, in a lot of the private sector camps. But we purposely didn't do it last summer because we were so concerned about COVID and just people were going through a lot. What we are doing, though, is we are calling people, and when we do, we are trying to find out and push people to say, if you're not going to use the camp, please drop out, just so that we can continue to open up as many slots as possible.
Really helpful, thank you. And before I turn back over to Mr. DeFrenti, I'll just opine. I was glad to see the change that you made that is actually already in effect for the Enjoy registration tomorrow, separated by those 3 different times, which I think roughly mirror the popularity or the hotly competitive camps. And I do think there is a dynamic where it's sort of the self-perpetuating, the run on the banks phenomenon, right? Because it's so hard to get your kid into, say, gymnastics or robotics. Everyone tries to log on at 7 a.m. to do that. And then there's this sort of sense that there's nothing available, right? Because the system has crashed in this case, which we are absolutely certain is not going to happen again. But I do think while we await the full review, and you've described the scope well for us now, at least staggering those times, I hope will work better. I think we'll probably find out and be hearing from a lot of parents at 7 a.m. tomorrow if it doesn't, but we'll be keeping fingers crossed. Mr. DeFrenti, back to you.
Sure, that's very helpful. Keeping in mind we've got the review coming, I want to, I'll probably follow up with this question and see if we can have a little longer or a dialogue so I make sure I understand. The numbers that you mentioned, 12,800 enrollments, 8,800 wait list, and 5,700 slots open. In our, we'll make budget decisions and we have to address, there's a lot of things to address, but it'll help me to kind of scope-wise understand we may not be able to address the way we approach the program is more as offering camps rather than, I think there's some desire for full childcare for the summer. And I just wondered if, that's what I want to seek to understand. Do we have enough budgeting in there not to go to full childcare for the summer for every student or every young person, but to imagine a little bit broader of a program? Or is that really not what we're envisioning budget-wise here? And that's, I don't know if that's a specific question for this moment, or happy to follow up, but if you have thoughts.
I just don't know if it's a budget question per se. I think it would be worth looking into, again, it's more about the models that we provide and what models we want to provide going forward. And then from there, we can figure out what we need funding-wise. Typically, though, our camps are part of our cost recovery model. We have opportunities for people to get fee reductions, and that's sort of baked into our budget. So I don't know if it's so much a funding allocation question or more a conversation around what is the approaches we want to take when we do this revision, not just the registration system.
And then I'll yield just one last, it's just the model, will the models be considered in the review or not? Probably not.
Right now, we're looking specifically, so there's kind of 2 things. We have a camp committee. We work on camp all year round. So
Yeah.
I'm really trying to be specific on this project. And this project is related to registration. Because I need to figure out how to solve this registration issue, which is access, equity. That doesn't mean that we should not be looking at what we provide. And in terms of, do we shift to a different model? Do we shift to a multi-week camp sign up? Because typically it's mostly by week. What do we do? And I have a whole team that meets. I have 2 full-time staff who only really work on camp, and then we also I have a separate thing that we sort of focus on operations. But for this specific issue of solving registration, I'm trying to keep us actually kind of targeted because we need to get to September 2022 for the next year. That doesn't mean that in the interim we can't be talking about what are we providing.
Excellent, thanks.
And I know Ms. Garvey's eager to get
I know, and it's really the same issue. Do you have a sense how many people depend on the summer camps for childcare? I mean, people sign children up for, for summer camp for different reasons, and that gets to this question about what are we providing?
I don't. I mean, to be honest,
Yeah.
because we have people who depend on it for childcare for 1 week, and we have people who depend
Yeah.
on it for childcare for 10 weeks, and it's hard for us to say, we don't really get that level of detail. When we do our the engagement, we want to keep it short. We don't want to have some kind of massive survey that we're going out, but I want to ask some targeted questions, and that's the kind of targeted question we want to ask.
Yeah, at some point.
Know what their plan B would be, I guess is sort of what you're asking.
Well,
right?
I think at some point, what we provide there's a community in much of the Western world, childcare is not a worry for people, but here it really is. And we do have a childcare initiative, we have camp, and poor parents are just completely fragmented, trying to piece two things together. And I don't know, this isn't for now, or maybe even really soon, but it seems to me a holistic look at what just the experience somebody has needing childcare through the schools and through our summer camps would be useful. I think there are a number of parents for whom summer camps is really crucial to them for their childcare. And is that a need that we want to be fulfilling? I would argue at some point it is, but that is it's making you do something different in a way from what's been done before. So,
And a short-term version of that we're thinking about is with the Lubber Run and the Gunston preschool program. Now that those are all-day programs, we are considering, should they just be year-round?
Yes.
Right now, we're offering them as a camp, but we're thinking, well, if someone is just enrolled in it, maybe it should just be a year-round program, and those children who are enrolled that would be their summer program.
Yeah.
So we are thinking about that.
No, thank you. And it is something I think we, as a county government, we want to be thinking about. I'm not sure it should be your job to do all of that thinking, but I think we should just.
Yeah, great, thank you. And Mr. Carantones.
Thank you. It's amazing how multifaceted and multipurpose the Department of Parks and Recreation is, right? So, and I have to tell you, one of the reasons I'm so grateful to you and to all your team for your work is exactly because you serve such a multi-layered, incredibly broad scope, and every time with a lot of focus. So, on the discussion on how our budget should reflect our focus on improving the registration process to the program, I really appreciate your focus on that. I think that we all will learn a lot in the process. The small conversations that I had so far is that the offer side, the supply side, tries to figure out what actually the demand is, and it seems to me that finding a way to have people actually sign up and express their preferences in advance and keep track of that is kind of a good practice, and then decide about the best mode of how to apportion this supply. So, but lottery systems have a certain advantage there because they ask the participants to sign up in advance, so that you know what the demand could be. But this is a different conversation. One thing that I wanted to ask you here is, you even mentioned that at the very, very beginning, the issue of capacity with fields and trends and emerging needs, like for example the pickleball surge, etc. And that combined with the fact that you told us that you have a 16% vacancies. So is that, what needs to be done to service this increased demand in sports and in use of the facilities while we are seemingly not capable? I mean, it's not very realistic to expect that we will reduce this 16%, that we will be able to have appropriate staff to do that work?
Well, in our facilities, I think we've always said this, and I think it continues, the future is just multi-purpose. So that anything that we're doing, there's no court that's just one court. There's no field that just plays one sport. Even in a baseball outfield can be used in an off-season for something else. And so in terms of a management of our resources, so so I think there's two questions there. Sort of one is how we manage these resources, and I think that that's sort of the future for a lot of our things is sort of multi-use. I think on the staffing side, we are really hopeful that we can continue to get that number down. We're actively recruiting on all the positions, and we're hoping everything will stabilize soon. But I think you've heard it from all our colleagues. It's just a problem we have right now. We have ways through just using our current staff, through some temporary employees, and then just, not maybe doing some new things that we are able to manage where we are. But it hasn't always been, it's been a challenge. I think COVID for part of it, because not all of our centers have always been open. We've been able to have some flexibility there too, for example, with say Walter Reed being used as a vaccination site and Arlington Mill not fully open. We've been able to take some of that staff and shift them to other places where we need people to help out. Similar, some of the vacancies we've had some of the preschools, we have our co-op program, which is only really doing things outside. So that staff has been helping out in the preschool program. So part of it is just this kind of constant shifting around to see like where we have holes and trying to plug them.
Okay, because I've seen that also at the Aquatics Center, it is a challenge there to staff it as well. And, when you want to get to more than 300 or, 350 users a day in average, you need to have a program that attracts people. And this is a fantastic center that can do so much more. So that I really see that as a major impediment to progress here. That's just, that's my main takeaway from the presentation, that staffing is so critical right now. And the question is, what should we be doing to enable you to staff the department better?
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. I don't know if we've got another round of questions. I'll ask just one others that I had apropos of comments from a few of our commissions, as well as general interest in the community. Certainly, we've heard a lot of advocacy for an updated tree canopy study. Can you tell us whether there is or any currently planned? I know I'm trying to remember what we're calling it now. It's no longer the Forestry and Natural Resources Master Plan. It is the
FNRP.
Okay, great. With that forthcoming, that may be one of the recommendations, but timing, and then to the extent we know, are there any benchmarks about what the appropriate time horizon is? How often, best practice would tell us to conduct a study like that?
So our hope is, if everything goes well, as I said, this spring, we're going to be putting out the draft first plan. That'll be our second engagement in the process. We would hope in winter 2023 that the board would be adopting the new plan. We're hoping this to be, if we can, because this is right now a sub-element, kind of quickly do this. So there is an opportunity after that is adopted to do the tree study. Could be the first. I think the plan will come out with, and I can't obviously say, but a series of plans. I think Mr. Klingelhofer was, referring to that and almost seeing that each of these things typically are about a 5-year time horizon. So if you sort of think about each of these plans, typically cost anywhere from like $100,000 to $150,000 to do the plan. So do you do, or the survey, not plan. So you do like the tree survey, there's the deer survey, there's the natural resources survey. That's the kind of key considerations that we've talked about, is should there be sort of future, some of the implementation to these plans does cost money. And so a tree study should, we want to do it immediately after. I hope that the FNRP could be adopted within the next fiscal year.
Great. Thank you so much. And Ms. Garvey, I'll give you the final question. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Karantonis.
So to understand it correctly, it is advisable to do the complete study or the survey after we have adopted the goals of the plan.
That is what we have said all along, that we feel like it's important for us to get through the FNRP. And then the next step is to do the tree study. That way we'll get the information back from it. There'll be adopted policy from the board that will then help us to then deal with the implementation from those findings. And so I think, again, I can't predetermine what would be in the plan, but I would think that our next study, once the plan is adopted, would be to do the tree survey.
Great. And Ms. Garvey, I'll give you the final question.
Okay, and again, this is a larger question that don't take a long time to answer it. We can talk about it later. And that is actually on the, we've heard a little bit about the nature centers, and they have been cut back. You're talking to somebody we used to take our children to the nature center on weekends quite regularly, many years ago now. What's your overall philosophy and thoughts about sort of the future of the nature centers. This isn't a specific, this is again, maybe not for this budget, but looking forward. And you've got so much on your plate. That's what I looked at. You can't sort of concentrate on everything at once. But do you have a thought about the role of the nature centers in the community?
So thank you for asking that. So before the pandemic, in Arlington, there are 3 nature centers, 2 that are that we operate, and then 1 is Potomac Overlook. They all were open every day of the week except for Mondays when they all were closed. And they were all open basically from about 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. When the pandemic happened and we closed down completely, we made the determination when we began to reopen that that's actually the time we also put in 2 employees we felt we had the rule to have 2 employees. That was based on, you may recall, we had a sexual assault in our department in 2019. We realized that we should not, for a best practice, to always have 2 employees. So on the days currently, so right now in Arlington, there is always a nature center open every day, but Monday still. So it's either Potomac Overlook, Gulf Branch, or Long Branch. On the days that either center is closed, that's when they're often going to APS. We do a program where we are back, and we're actually back in schools now, where we are bringing nature to all the first graders. So I think what would be great to spend some time this coming year to think about is what is the right sort of mix of, like, there is nature center programming happening, it just might not always be happening in the nature center. And while I appreciate them discussing the opportunity about having it open, is 10 to 5 the right time? We have no evening hours currently, and so are there ways for us to look, if we're going to open them for more, what is the right mix? So I think we're going to look this year to see if we can use some temp dollars to maybe increase some hours, but I would say it would be a good exercise for next year to bring forward some sort of recommendations on the future of sort of nature center hours and nature center programming, because I really do think it's important. We talked about this a little bit. We need to bring nature to where people are, and not everybody can get to a center. So I also really have been proud of the work that the team has done to go to our special events, to go out into the parks, to go out to areas where they don't normally go and get out of the centers so that they can actually meet people where they are. So I think it's a conversation about the centers, but also nature programming and education too.
Yep, absolutely. I'm glad we're going to have that conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Rudolph, thank you. And I think we can all echo the thanks that were given by our commissions to your extraordinary staff. We really appreciate all the work that you do. And we will welcome next our library team. I see Ms. Kresh and Ms. Gable, who will be joining us. We are glad to have you. Come. Unless the manager has any brilliant words of introduction, you can join us and launch right in as soon as you're ready. Thank you.
Oh, it's our favorite site, Ms. Kresh with tote bags. It's beautiful.
Take your time.
Mark gave me a hard time because I didn't have a hat for my last
Wait until 8 o'clock.
We're here till 8 o'clock? Great. All right, so everybody gets a copy of.
I have been giving purples every now and then.
Yes,
We'll see. Finally, I got a turn.
Yes, and because Mark, this is his favorite thing.
Thank you. This one.
Oh, you can toss. I can catch. I'm skilled. Thank you. Oh, that's very nice. That's very nice.
That's actually indeed a community stress relief.
So who did not get it? Hands on it here.
It was just the chair of the county board, don't worry.
You got it? Christian, please, for Katie.
Oh, we'll do.
Bad throw.
That's all right. That's all right.
Thank God
I wasn't
Tom
going to say
Brady's
it
coming
publicly.
back.
I will issue the disclaimer right up front. The books are paid for by the Friends of the Library, not by taxpayer funds.
And Diane, since you were last here, I think our office staff has turned over significantly, so we'll have to orient them into how to adequately report on this contribution. I think I've even forgotten, but anyway. Thank you.
Yes.
They should be always distributed with a hint of how people can contribute.
That's a good point. Good
Right?
point.
So-
So thank you to the Friends, and I think we're now ready to turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, County Board, for this opportunity to have this conversation. I know it's been a long afternoon, but we appreciate some of your time to talk about what we're doing in libraries. I'd also like to thank Mark Schwartz and his team for the support that they continue to give us. I'm joined by Deputy Ann Gable today. Her mother was a librarian, so even though Ann wasn't, she's an honorary librarian. I also would like to introduce my amazing leadership team. They're not joining us today. The public service staff are Leonard Thompson, Sherry Henry, and Dina Little. They are the leaders of our public service program. Peter Petruski is the leader of Collections and Access, and Stacia Aho is the leader of the Center for Local History, plus the web presence that we have in social media. And finally, a thank you to the Friends. Mark just mentioned the Friends, but they really are singly responsible for all of our programming. Every time there's an author event, every time there's a summer reading program, every time there's a special program to celebrate Juneteenth or Halloween or Women's History Month or Black History Month or whatever, all of that is because of the large S and the commitment of the Friends of the Arlington Library. So the next slide, please. Our mission statement, the three most important words there are story, connection, and inclusion. Those are the hallmarks of the services that we provide in the library, and we do it through the staff and the hiring that we do that we hope mirrors the community, the patrons we serve, identifying who is served, who isn't, and why not, our collections, and our programs. Next slide, please. Highlights of last year, telling Arlington's story was a big part of what we were doing with the community. Mrs. Garvey, I had the pleasure of working with her on the History Task Force, where we celebrated 100 years of Arlington, the name, and that's represented by the photo at the bottom where we had that trunk of fun stuff. But we also celebrated and conducted several oral histories honoring and acknowledging the 20th anniversary of 9/11 and our public safety staff. We conducted a walking tour of Little Saigon. We again had the 100th anniversary celebration. And we also launched a major collecting effort called Reencuentro, which is the photo on the right-hand side, where we are attempting to tell the story of the Latinos in our community. And Emma Viola Sanchez has been extremely valuable to that effort. She has donated or is in the process of donating her papers, and we look forward to having additional events where we hope Mr. Tejada, for example, and others who have made a contribution to our community can be recognized. We also had a very exciting Arlington Reads. We probably had about one program a month. The theme was food for thought. We discussed democracy. We discussed immigration. We discussed the media and its role in preserving democracy. And last fall, we had a very exciting and robust series on climate and the effect of climate change on our environment. And Bina Venkramaran's book was just one of the 4 that we had. In addition to these special programs, however, we also continued to work with the mitigation of COVID in the community. We were involved in the meals distribution program. We have a kiosk. We got kits, test kits from the state, from a grant the state got, and we distributed them. We have been part of the information phalanx with OEM, so we have continued to provide a lot of support to that effort. And more recently, we are installing opioid emergency boxes in all of our branches so that we can support mitigation of the opioid crisis, which has been so ravaging, not only for this community, but across the state. And so the staff are being trained by DHS in the use and administration of Narcans, et cetera. So that's another way that we're giving back to the community. Next slide, Ann, please. So the new now, I can't call it the new normal because I don't think there's anything normal about the state that we're in, but it's the new now. And you see there a photo of Columbia Pike Library, which I believe all of you attended the reopening of last summer, a long overdue. Over the last year, thanks to the manager and his support of what we're doing and the county board, we have as of September 2021, reopened all of our branches, including 3 locations on Sunday. We're still hoping to add a branch Westover Sundays, hours as well, sometime later this spring. But that was a huge, huge milestone starting in March of last year. And it took us a long time, but we're back. We are still hiring, and more about that in a few slides. We are doing story times. We've got the truck out on the road doing events. So there's a lot going on with book giveaways and in general representing in the community. Next slide, please. Equity is a part of everyday decision making in everything that we do. I'm a part of the digital equity sponsor group along with Claude Williamson and Jack Belcher, and one of the things that directly affected libraries was the provision of outdoor Wi-Fi at library locations. We began that process in 2020, and I guess in the early part of this year, succeeded in adding outdoor Wi-Fi at all library locations. Huge success. In 2020, we had, I think, 3 locations and 365,000 separate sessions. We are now close to 900,000 separate Wi-Fi sessions. So clearly there was a need in the community for outdoor Wi-Fi. We're also, I want to just throw a shout of support to Claude and Jack for the broadband study, because I'm involved in that. I realize it's in the procurement stage and you've already received presentations on that. And the final area that we're exploring, again, actively with DHS is providing a teleservices portal, if you will, at Columbia Pike Library, which would be an actual physical location with equipment, with white noise machines that we could ensure privacy for purposes of being used by members of the community who want to make a telehealth appointment, who want to have a job interview. So it would be more safe and secure and private than some of our meeting room spaces now. So again, very early stages. It's one of the 3 areas that I'm working on with Jack and Claude, but lots of opportunity for a very special and targeted service at Columbia Pike Library. We are working with APA to create a summer program for youth. They have a dynamic resident services, Marquand Jackson. Perhaps you've met him. He's met with us, and we're going to do a youth literacy program at Columbia Library. Books, book groups, talking about books and the importance of literature and reading. Anne was telling me about statistics. The statistics for young children who have been adversely affected by COVID and their reading ability is very worrisome. And I think it's an opportunity for all of us as government officials to work to make sure that these children are not left behind. If you can't read, you can't do a whole lot. And we're privileged in this community that we have a lot of resources, and I want us to be focusing on making sure that no one, again, is left behind. Arlington Reads is featuring rebooting the classics. It's a reboot of classics like Great Gatsby and Jane Eyre and some of those great things that we were forced to read in high school. But the young man I'm pictured with, who had a very cool hat, is Dwayne Betts. He has a very interesting personal story. He was sent to jail at the age of 16 for a 9-year sentence that could have been life because of a carjacking. It was the only time he ever did anything like that, and was in the wrong place with the wrong crowd at the wrong time. So he went to jail in Virginia, and one night in desperation, because he was in solitary, because he had done something, he was screaming aloud, "Please, somebody give me a book." And sliding under his door came a copy of Black Poets by Dudley Randall. And it turned his life around. He was always a reader and a good student, but opening himself to the world of poetry changed his life, and he will openly admit that literature saved his life. He got out of prison, he went to Yale Law School, he has created the Freedom Reads Foundation, which has Mellon funding, and through that program, he's creating curated collections that can be placed in detention centers and prisons across the United States. So we are talking with him actively now about getting one for the detention center. We've talked with Camille Watkins, who is a young woman in the sheriff's office who is working on that renovation project. But this is not just social justice, but it's making sure that people who don't otherwise have access to literature, to books, to improving their minds, to having workshops, have a chance to do so. And there's lots more I can say about it, and the entire series this year will be represented by authors who are working with Dwayne on spreading this wealth. Let's see, the last couple of items there, we looked very hard at our internal organization over the COVID period and determined that we could do some things differently. For example, we always had a dichotomy between what's done in central versus what's done in the branches. Yeah, more or less the same, but policies, practices. So we've blown that model up, and we're now one public service operation. We put professional librarians at each branch, which was not always necessarily the case. Every library always had a youth services librarian, but we've also added a senior librarian for policy and consistency's sake. And change is hard, but I think overall we're able to provide better, more targeted service, not just in Central Library, but across the system. And Anne was the leader of that and the principal designer, and she and the team really pulled that off. And it's made a big difference in our ability to provide public service. And then finally, one of the conversations you all have been having is how do we have conversations about equity and inclusion and microaggressions, et cetera, in our departments. And one of the things that's been difficult for us, we did form an equity group, but we don't have an OD specialist. So we don't have someone on hand to do training and development and to make sure we're having those conversations. So we have repurposed hours from a couple of positions to recreate a position that was lost many budget cycles ago so that we can be keeping pace with the need to have these conversations, and not just occasionally or during Black History Month, but throughout the year. Anne was involved with the cohort that Samia Bird pulled together, and we're still figuring out how this is all going to work, but we're excited about it. And one final comment, when Dwayne was at the library 2 weeks ago, it was our first in-person Arlington Reads since Roxane Gay in March of 2020. And Mr. Dorsey's wife and daughters were there, and I have a lovely picture of your younger daughter with me to show that. But it was, a long wait, and that was an exceptional program, but we were literally in the first week. I think 2 days later, we shut down, and you've heard me speak about how difficult that was. Next, please, the budget summary. Expenses, an increase in expenses, I will talk about why that is, and an increase in revenue, which is modest, and it really just it tends to state aid, which we get at a rate of around $170,000, and maybe some printer's fees. We eliminated fines a couple of years ago. We've not yet had a full year in which to be able to evaluate. We did try to get any outstanding fines back, but people moved and did not leave forwarding addresses, so we're still working on that. But that accounts for those two changes. And Arpa funding is continuing to be used for Glen Carlin and Cherrydale libraries. Next slide, please. Budget highlights and equity. Big deal here is the children's librarian. I know the Bosman Library downstairs is not yet ready for reopening soon. I walked through it this morning. We're getting there. But this will be a full-service library. This will not be a convenience for government staff. This will be full service. And We use the equity dashboard to determine the demographics of the area, and we're very confident this is the highest level of concentration of Hispanic residents in Arlington outside of Columbia Pike, and we heartily believe that the opportunity for literacy and developing literacy skills, especially for the 0 to 5 age group, is going to be rewarded. So we're really, really excited. I know Key Elementary, we're looking forward to doing some programming with them. We've got Rocky Run up the road, doing some outdoor programming. So we're really excited, to put this forward as a request. Next slide, please. Library collections. I want to talk more about this at the end of the presentation, but right now, thank you all or Mark and his team for putting together a proposal for $175,000 in one time. This is not the first time Mr. Manager has put this forward, and many times you all support that, and we're very appreciative. With that money, we hope to expand the print collection that we're purchasing for Bosman, particularly in the area of children's materials. E-books and audiobooks, the next slide will show that that's a never-ending. We have to constantly feed the beast. There's a high demand for it, and they're quite expensive. And the outreach collections refers to what I'll call outposts, stand-alone book lockers, for a lack of a better term, that we will put in Arlington Mill, potentially, or Walter Reed Recreation Center, or an apartment building so that people can help themselves. So that's been done in other communities. My collections manager told me pleadingly, Diane, it's the only thing I want to do. So I have to do it. But I think again, it's another way to recognize that going where the patrons are. They're not all coming to us. We have to go to them. Next slide, please. Collection holds. If you haven't read this book, it's great. If you haven't read this book, you will be waiting for it for a long time. 19 weeks wait time for the print version. 43 weeks wait time for the ebook, which frankly, I've read ebooks, I don't recommend them. E-audio, a whopping 36 wait time, and also the most expensive of the three formats. The library must purchase books in all formats. People expect to have the richness of our collection displayed along these three formats. And ideally, pre-pandemic, we were around at 12 weeks. We're nowhere near 12 weeks. The more money we spend, yes, we could buy tons of copies. We could buy 100 copies of Lincoln Highway, and then it has its moment, and then something else has its moment, and then I have them on the trucks for the Friends book sale. Still a great book, but it's a balancing act, and our staff does the best it can to keep the hold times, but 1943 and 36 are too long. I try always to borrow the books that I read from the library because I want to experience what everybody else is experiencing. I did break down recently and buy The Anomaly because I just couldn't wait for it. But it's, I think we can do better, and we can have a separate conversation about how to do that. We've broken it out year by year, but I think that the wait times are critical. And we lost 20,000 users during the pandemic. We had a patron base of something over 75,000, and now 55,000 is the folks represented by, they've used their card in the last year, and we want those people back. And maybe a lot of them switch to audio. Well, then we've got to bring them back. I kind of switched to audio, and I don't want to have to spend a lot of money on the books just like everyone else. So 12 weeks, great. 10 weeks, better. 8 weeks, best of all for a wait time. So again, we can have a separate conversation about hold times and what a funding plan might look like going forward. Next slide, please. Public service model. Prior to the pandemic, we used a lot of temporary staff, and they basically filled in for permanent staff. If you came into the library, you and your children, Mr. Dorsey, on a weekend, you were very likely dealing with temporary staff, certainly in the evenings and very likely on Saturdays. What we are doing now is converting that body of money, if you will, to permanent positions. I think there are 17 total that we're hoping to convert over a couple of years. The initial tranche, I think 8.5. but it's an opportunity to recognize that this is full-time professional work. And yes, volunteers can help. Mrs. Garvey raised that issue earlier. I completely agree. Temps are useful, just as substitute teachers are important, but substitute teachers, in rare cases, of course there are exceptions, are not teaching the entire year. So we want to get to that model where we have a full-time permanent staff at all levels, and we've spent a lot of time on figuring out what will get us to the next level. And with Mark and DMF's help, we've come up with a model that we think works. The first positions will start to be filled in January of 2023. So we have a little bit of time, but I think this is going to be a real sea change. When I arrived at the library, I didn't understand the funding and the staffing model then, and had some conversations, and each time we had budget cuts, the first thing to go was the temp budget, which has an automatic negative impact on our ability to provide public service. And when it happened yet again this last time, and almost no temps who were with us before closing agreed to come back, we had to shift gears and do something else. So again, with Ann's help and advice from Mark and his team and Michelle and DMF, we think we have a good plan. Next, please. We're super excited about a new Columbia Pike branch with the bank purchase, SunTrust.
Maybe they left some money.
They might have. And planning for a Crystal City branch, which again would be unlike the Connection, which was very limited, but would be more like our full-service branches, which we currently have 7 of. 8 is Bosman, and this would be a new opportunity for us in Crystal City. The Great Resignation, I'm sure other department directors talked about this. We too have had our challenges with recruiting and retaining staff. I think in public services alone, you heard me use the figure of 25% of our public-facing service people were gone because of the pandemic. Gone for lots of reasons. I don't want to do this job anymore. My husband's retiring. I'm leaving. I'm rethinking. I'm going to school. So the Great Resignation is upon us. And I was telling Ann earlier, for every position we fill, and we've been in continuous hire from last year through now, today, a person leaves. They want to go back to school. They bought a house in Prince William, and they want to live closer to home. So we're getting there. We're not nearly in the dire straits we were a year ago, but it's an ongoing. We do work very closely with HR on hiring strategies. We use our own networks. We attend conferences, and there are a lot of people who, are doing different things, and a lot of people are competing for the same talents. When we were putting up our postings, so was Loudoun, so was DC, so was Prince William. So that's something that we have to continue to work on. We've also had the situation where the recommended candidate came all the way to me for the final conversation, which is usually right before we make the offer. We were in negotiations on salary with 3 individuals, and then they said, never mind. That's a lot of effort. I mean, just as well, if they really didn't want to come here, that's great. But that was a big time commitment. And then the final thing about future budget, the local history app, that's something that Mark has very much been supportive of. We're pretty excited about the possibilities for a local history app so that we can ground ourselves in what Arlington was and what it is today and what it might be in the future. And I know Mr. DiFerenti and Mrs. Garvey are very interested in taking a look at our Center for Local History and our Woodmont facility, and we've been having conversations with the Arlington Historical Society and the Office of Historic Preservation to talk about how we collect and preserve Arlington history, how we tell Arlington's story, all right? So look for more about the history app in coming months. So the final slide. The collections are the backbone of the library. I mean, that may seem, well, the libraries are like community centers. Yes, in part. But the thing that we do that no one else does is put books in the hands of readers. Whether it's audio or or paper, it's a book in the hand of the readers. No one else does that. And that's incredibly important. And because of the space and the times we're living in, it's even more important that our collections be broad, diverse, so that we can all together work on telling our origin story. It's not my responsibility alone, it's all of ours. And if you haven't listened to or read Clint Smith's How the Word is Passed, put it on your list. It is mind-blowing. And one of the best reads I ever managed to read, and it's terrific. So there's a lot with disinformation. There are publishers who are finding, Hoopla was a service that we had a few years ago. It was a streaming service. They have some 18,000 publishers, but a number of publishers got through their guardrails, and they were publishing information that was patently false and hate-mongering and nothing more than pure propaganda. To the CEO's credit, he removed the titles. This is not new. There are communities across the country, sadly, who want to remove books from the shelves. It's happening in local school systems. It's happening across the country. Idaho tried to pass a bill where they would fine and jail librarians who put something, quote, harmful in the hands of a minor. I would have difficulty defining harmful. Maybe Idaho has a better handle on that. Happily, it did not pass through their Senate. But I think it's a real threat. And I read 100 books last year. And I throw that statistic out not to be impressive, but because I could read 100 books. I had access to 100 books. I had access to Toni Morrison and James Baldwin and a number of debut authors, the likes of like Mbue's book, for example. I mean, these are critical times for making sure that truth doesn't die. And many times I think libraries are the last defense between enlightenment and ignorance. And we are doing everything we can to make sure that our selection policies are clear and understood. And yes, we get challenged occasionally, but it's so important that we be available, not just for our patrons, but for school children, for everybody, so that the origin story isn't one person's story or one group's story, but everybody's story. And the libraries are at the front and center of that. And so I feel like the collections, if I were to put a stake in the ground as the most important thing for me as the chief librarian, as somebody who in June will be celebrating 48 years in librarianship, the collections are core. So with that, I will stop and be very eager to hear questions or comments. Before, I meant to say something about this amazing book. It's gotten terrific reviews. It's for middle schoolers. You might remember Robert Dawson. It's his wife who wrote this. It's a debut novel. It's phenomenal. It's historical, and it's based on slaves who escaped and hid in the swamps of Dismal Swamp, which is located in part in Virginia and I think in North Carolina. So Amina Luqman Dawson is coming to do a Juneteenth program with us in June, along with Jubilee singers and a whole host of other people. We do try to celebrate our local authors. We have a program with Wilma Jones coming up as well. So lots going on, and I promise I'll stop.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. That is an inspiring conclusion as well. Given the late hour, I'm going to urge us to see if we can't limit ourselves to the things that could not be asked in follow-up that must be asked at this table. And we'll start with Mr. Dorsey, Mr. Carantonis.
I'll just take you up on your offer to provide us with some thoughts on the funding model necessary in order to bring those wait times down in the collection. And then my question to you is, do you do any work with Arlington Public Schools directly, alluding to the learning loss, if you prefer that term, during COVID, to figure out remediation plans and how the library might be of help during the summer when
Great
schools go out of session?
question. Our youth librarians work in the before times, our youth librarians work very closely with the school librarians, both to do book talks as well as promote summer reading. That's something that we very much want to get back to. The data is very clear. If you don't learn to read by the time you're 7 or 8 years old, it's pretty much over. And what we can do to remediate that because of COVID and the times we've been in, I think will be a real challenge. But yes, we do plan to reach out to them and see what, if any, joint programming we can do.
All right.
Thank
and
you.
I'll never lose an opportunity to publicly just thank you, Dorsey family, power users. So we do appreciate it and appreciate your quality professional work. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you. Mindful time. I don't believe that libraries are the last defense, they're first defense.
I'm sorry?
I don't believe that libraries are the last defense, they're first defense. It's the absolutely first defense.
Thank you.
Also the rescue boat at the end. So I'm really shocked about the price of the ebooks. And is there any angle of regional cooperation with other regional library systems that could give us any leverage there?
We have had those conversations previously. We all have different constituencies. Frankly, Fairfax is larger, but our reading public is much heavier. We have, what I'll call power readers and power users. So I think the publishers also militate against that. Because
I guess I see the reason.
There is one emerging publisher. You might sometimes listen to Audible books, and they choose not to work with libraries. That is part of their plan, and that has been a barrier for us pretty much since ebooks were introduced in the 90s. First, it was limiting the number of circulations, and it was always cost. And yeah, the model is a little better, but the prices are unacceptable and put these materials out of reach of many people.
Yeah, thank you. I will get back to you. And this is a strategic thing. A collection is just not occurring overnight. It has to be a strategic pathway to a great collection. I'm especially encouraged by the fact that you see now the entire system as one system, not only as a central and branched system.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Garvey?
Yeah, I'll just kind of pick up a little bit, same thing. It occurred to me going through, we go through this every year. The cost of the ebooks. It feels like, and you maybe even don't know, it's ripe for disruption, is it not? There is such a market out there. I don't think each ebook costs very much. It just feels to me like somebody ought to break into this somehow. I don't know if anybody's working on it or you know anything or want to make any comment, but I'm just kind of curious.
Libraries are working on it. Libraries have been working on it and have done some very impressive work taking on the publishers. And we've made some modest gains, which is why we don't have circulation limits on some of our titles. But ebooks are not owned by us, they're leased. And that's another part of the model. And another part of, the challenge. I can replace this multiple times, provided it continues to circulate, and that I don't have that power with ebooks or e-audio. So yes, I agree with you. It's ripe for disruption, and maybe we can, plan something together.
We maybe could do. There we go. Yeah, and I just want to thank you for all of the work, on the anniversary and everything you're doing with history. And I have more fun working with our head librarian here than a lot of things. So thank you very much. Yeah, looking forward to.
Mr. DeFranchi.
I just want to say thank you to you and Ms. Gable and the whole team for everything. I thought of the phrase "keep reading" or keep reading Arlington, and with respect to your work, keep hiring seems like irrelevant. That you've made so much progress, and a big thank you there. You mentioned story, connection, and inclusion. I feel like in this work session you've given us all three. So thanks.
Thank you very much.
Put.
Thank you.
I'll just associate myself with Mr. Dorsey's comments about sort of looking forward to seeing, guidance or a model for how we can think about balancing those three platforms that you described so compellingly. And, I do think sometimes we don't always, in communications with the community about expectations, assign costs to things, right? And certainly we don't want to put a price on knowledge, right? But I think you talked about such an important piece about how there is a real peak in terms of hot books, right? And we could spend a lot of money to satisfy demand in a pretty short window. And so as we think about just how do we communicate that, how do we help people understand, as a library user, I sort of know that when I read about a book in the New York Times that gets a glowing review and I go to add it to my list, that wait is going to be probably 3-4 times as long as, a book that I've decided I read 20 years ago and want to reread again, right? Sure. So just thinking about how we can communicate with users about, how we create some sense of balance between, a desire to invest and shorten those wait times, but also recognition that it will probably never be cost effective to make the wait time for an absolute hit book the same as a book that's been in circulation for 20 years, right? And figuring out what the right sweet spot is as we engage users in what they think and would like to see as well.
Well, and because Arlington is a curious and passionate community, every time a book hits the headlines like Mouse did about 6 weeks ago, that book still has more than 150 holds.
Yeah.
And we have Nicole Hannah-Jones coming for Banned Book Week this September to talk about. That's great. Like, oh, yay, it's being banned. Let's all read it. That's the good news. The bad news is it's being banned. Right. And so we're looking forward to doing a program with her. Not quite sure what the format will be yet, but we keep this issue of freedom to read, if you will, front and center, and trying again to put books in the hands of readers in the most cost-effective way as we can, and that's important. So yes, we will look forward to some follow-on conversations and some strategies, and looking forward, maybe we'll do a disruption.
I love it. You two are going to launch a tech app that totally changes the game.
Yeah.
And I'll say too, speaking of features, I love the while you wait list that pops up when I add myself to a list. I think that's another way of keeping readers reading.
Well, it is. You can't get this one, but how about this? And as I said, I became a believer in audiobooks because I couldn't necessarily get books easily from the library and print books. But print is still alive. I like to refer to it as the artist formerly known as print is not dead. We have to continue to, you can write that down, Mark.
That's we appreciate you so much. Thank you. This is always one of the most inspiring of the budget presentations. Don't tell the other department directors. Thank you for the gifts. We really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to reading both of these too ever since I saw Dasani's story in the New York Times. So this is an especially great pick.
I'm going to be doing
It comes back to you as soon as possible.
No, that's the piece.
Thank you.
All right, on that note, we are adjourned. We'll see everybody on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Thursday at 3 p.m. Thanks so much.